Am I a jerk for taking my daughter's boyfriend out to dinner? My 14-year-old daughter May has been dating this boy Felix, also 14, for a couple of months now. He's a nice boy, really polite, but I can tell he most likely isn't from a well-to-do family. I don't have a problem with this though because as I said, he seems like a good person and that's what counts. He was going to take my daughter out for ice cream earlier today, and while he was waiting for her to get ready he asked me if he could have some peanut butter. I said, "Oh, don't you want to save room for the date?" But he explained he didn't have enough money to buy something for himself. He's always paid on their dates as far as I know. This poor kid was so hungry I could hear his stomach growling. Offered to give him some money but he said he's not allowed to accept cash. I then asked him if it'd be alright if I took him out for dinner with my daughter, and he called his mom and she said it was okay. When May came downstairs I told her the new plan. She was upset and thought it was lame that I'd be with them. I said I could just sit in the car and she could call me when it was time to pick up the check, but she was having none of it and said she was going out with some friends instead. It was a little embarrassing since she basically dumped him in front of me, but I kind of just moved on and asked Felix if he still wanted to go. He said yeah, so I took him down to Wendy's. We had a good time, but when I told May where I'd been she was furious. She accused me of liking her boyfriend romantically and that I shouldn't have gone on a date with him without her. I reminded her I'd given her that option and she'd refused, but she said that didn't change anything and now she can't trust me with any of her boyfriends. I tried to tell her I'm not interested in her boyfriend at all but she just ran out of the room. I feel bad for her but I don't think I did anything wrong.
Dads of Reddit, what is one thing you regret about having a daughter? I have a 17-year-old daughter and all she does is suck D and open her legs at school. I've tried to have the talk with her but no matter what I say she always seems to keep doing it. One day I approached her saying that I am taking away her iPhone until she understands not to keep having intercourse with random dudes at school. She explained to me that she has a problem and it is because of my lack of parenting when she was growing up. So I decided to spy on her while she was at school to see what kind of activities she was up to. While at school, I see her by the lockers and she is talking to another dude as usual and then she tries to seduce him. I am stunned why she would do such a thing, but anyways, I go back to hiding. Then I see them going to the bathroom near the math building. So like the good father I am, I decide to follow. I had to know what was going on with these encounters. While I am in the bathroom, I hear her moaning and getting pounded in one of the stalls. I almost shed a tear. I was so angry at her and disappointed that I had raised such a daughter. So I decided I must take action and knock on the stall. You will not believe what I saw. Men of Reddit, what happened when you tried to stick it in but it didn't fit? Well, let me tell you a story that happened to me back in junior year of high school. See, puberty was hitting me hard, and I was going through a massive growth spurt from 5'2" to around 5'9" in just a few years, but it wasn't just my height that was changing. I decided it was time to find a relationship, so I set my sights on a girl in my pre-calculus class. She was petite and didn't have much in the way of curves, but I thought she was really cool. We hit it off, and before long we found ourselves in her bedroom. One evening I was nervous, excited, and ready to take the next step, but when the moment came, things didn't quite go as planned. You see, I had grown quite a bit down there too, and let's just say her petite frame wasn't quite ready for what I had to offer. We tried different angles, positions, and even resorted to using various items to help, but nothing seemed to work. It was like trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, quite literally. We were both frustrated, disappointed, and honestly a little embarrassed. Eventually, we had to face the reality that it just wasn't going to happen. We laughed it off and decided to stick to other activities for the time being. Update Dads of Reddit. What is one thing you regret about having a daughter? So I'm at the stall and I begin to knock on it, letting her know my presence. I know you guys might say going into the bathroom was invading her privacy, but she's been doing this with a bunch of random guys at school and I had to confront her in the act. I started hearing shuffling and I peeped through the crack of the stall and noticed my daughter with some random dude half-dressed. I was so disappointed in her, I started to cry knowing I raised a naughty girl. Anyways, she opened the door and the last thing she was expecting was to see her father standing in front of her. She screamed at me asking what I was doing here and I told her I went to go spy on her because I knew she's been getting passed around like a blunt in the bathrooms. She started to break down and told me she was sorry and she was just trying to make some extra cash on the side. Out of nowhere, another dude walked in with cash ready in his hand saying it's his appointment time. I guess the dude thought I was in line or something because he asked me if my session was done. I was so furious and mad that I took her iPhone right then and there. I knew this would be the only way for her to stop getting with random dudes. Taking her phone away was the worst thing I could have ever done. She was telling me how much of a bad father I was and started to sneak dudes over at night to still make extra cash. I honestly do not know what to say to her because I don't even want to claim my daughter anymore. Update, men of Reddit. What happened when you tried to stick it in and it didn't fit? I'm honestly pretty embarrassed about this whole situation. A lot of people have been thinking I'm too big, plot twist, I'm actually too small. My wood couldn't get all the way in, so that's why we tried different positions and nothing worked at all. Anyways, the next day in pre-calc, she started apologizing to me, telling me she wished we could have done it. I started to break down and told her it wasn't her and it was totally my fault for not being able to get it up. The following days there was a bunch of awkward tension between us and it just didn't feel the same. But I knew I had to bounce back from this whole encounter and turn my L into a W. I asked her out on a date and she gladly accepted it and we went to the movies. One thing led to another and somehow her tongue was down my throat. The most we did was make out, but at the end of the day, action is action. She told me she was going to miss me and I had the bright idea to just invite her to mine's. I knew if she said no, I would be in the same boat going home by myself, so I just shot my shot. She surprisingly said yes and we were at mine's at no time. Now you might be asking how I was going to fit it in this time. Earlier that day, I went to the gas station and got a special pill. Those who know what I'm talking about know what pill I'm talking about, but anyways, I told her I had to use the bathroom and I popped my pill. Things got pretty steamy and when it came to the part to stick it in, my pill was activated, so I knew it was go time. Those 2 minutes of me being inside were the best 2 minutes of my life. I was so proud of myself because I finally lost my V card and I lasted longer than 1 minute. She was honestly so proud of me. This whole encounter was 4 years ago, and we've been dating for 3 years now, and I plan on proposing to her next week.
I've been falling in love with a cam girl. I feel so lost and alone right now. I've been suffering from depression for many years now. I've been getting help, taking my meds, going to therapy, but lately I've found myself in a very tough spot, and it's my own fault. I have a habit of frequenting adult cam sites. I don't have many friends, and it's a very convenient and easy way to talk to someone who will try to listen. I've fallen for cam models numerous times over the years, all ending in me having a broken heart and an empty wallet. You would think after 3 or 4 times I would finally learn my lesson, but no, I went and fell for one again. I just like their personality, I guess. It's a world I like. We have been talking daily for over 3 months now. Even when she's not working, we talk on Instagram all the time. But today she changed her attitude towards me. I haven't been tipping as much the past 2 days and she seems to have made it clear that if I'm not tipping she's not talking. I thought we had something more. I thought that since we were talking outside of her work that we had something, but I misread the situation. Again. I know she was just working. I know I was just another source of income for her, but damn, it still hurts. I've been alone my entire life. 35 years. Never had a long-term relationship. Never felt love other than familial. I'm your classic 30-something living with his parents nerd, with no job and no real plan in life. I'm lost and alone. I know I'll get over this, I know I'll move on, but God, it hurts. She made me feel like I was liked. Like someone was interested in me. Like I wasn't alone. And it all fell apart in one evening. In no less than 5 minutes. It hurts, and I only have myself to blame. I don't know what I expect out of this post: criticism, compassion, hate, whatever. I just want the interaction. I'm alone and depressed. I could use a distraction. If you're reading this right now, please leave a comment, give me something to do besides drink tonight. I changed everyone's passwords at work and then quit. I don't even care that this was immature and petty of me. I can't stress how awfully I was treated in this job, and how the entire team joined in on it. I was the only woman on the team, so it could have been that, but I don't want to play the gender card. You're probably thinking it's not one-sided, but it was. I was never rude to these guys. I'm not too fond of confrontation, so I used to be a doormat. I was afraid to rock the boat, so I just accepted how I was treated because I needed a job desperately at the time. One evening I decided it was the last straw. I went home for the night and never went back. I got various calls from them all on WhatsApp asking why I hadn't shown up, and I ignored it. Like I said, I can't handle conflict very well, so I couldn't face talking on the phone to them because I was already very upset from the evening before. A week after I quit my job, I realized I was still logged into my manager's account and he hadn't changed the password. This account was basically the restaurant's entire database. It had information for menus, staff, ordering, stock, etc. I decided to change the email to a fake one I'd made, and then I changed everyone's password so they couldn't access it. I don't know what happened after that. Nobody ever contacted me. I don't know whether I was the suspect or not. I don't go to that part of town anymore. What's the biggest sexual anticlimax you've had? I once came so hard with my now wife that my leg cramped up. It cramped up so bad that the muscle actually strained and pulled itself. Walked with a limp and brace for 2 weeks. In high school I was doing the deed with my girlfriend at her parents' house while they were at work. We hadn't quite got to the climax per se, but we were naked on the bed. Boom. Her mom comes through the door, obviously sad, sees us, and walks to her room and starts crying. Turns out her grandpa had just died and her mom came home to break the news. I could only just leave. I was doing the deed with my high school girlfriend in my bed. My dad is downstairs in the basement of the house working on his computer. I'm about to orgasm and the intercom rings and my dad's voice comes on the intercom saying, "Could you come down and help me?" My mouse isn't working. I think he did it on purpose to mess with me, but I've never confronted him about it. First night meeting up with my now GF, we were fooling around, and she was making noises. We started going at it pretty good, and she's making louder noises. Well, her dog wasn't too thrilled and bust in the room. I was on top of her, and the dog bit my butt. In high school, my prom date pooped on me during the deed. I smelled it before I saw it. I stopped and said, "I think the cat farted." 2 seconds later, she looked down in horror and ran to the bathroom. She got poop on my parents' sofa and on the white carpet. I cleaned it up while she was in the bathroom, then gave her a ride home. I never saw her again. I wonder if she still thinks about it today. This was back in 2001. My wife's obsession with plastic surgery has made me lose attraction for her. I've been married to my wife for 6 years now. When we got married, she said she wanted to do minor cosmetic procedures on her face to help with her insecurities. She had been insecure her whole life, so I was as supportive as I could have been. She got lip filler and Botox on her face. After a few months, she got more lip filler and her lips looked scary to me, but she was very happy with them, so I didn't say anything. Next, she wanted to get her boobs done. Again, she was happy with how they turned out, but I thought they looked weird. They were so big and stiff, and my wife is a petite and skinny woman, so it just didn't look proportional to the rest of her body. But again, it made her so happy, so I was fine with it. Last year, she said she was going to get a barrel this time. I actually told her I wasn't going to support her on this one because it's a dangerous procedure. There was a story on the internet that went viral a month or so prior about a woman who died during her barrel procedure. I was scared. I asked her if she could see a therapy or psychiatrist about her body dysmorphia before doing this, but she refused and said it hadn't helped when she tried it before. She said she was doing it with her own money anyway, so I didn't have a say in it. I shut up and took care of her after the procedure. I was so glad she was safe and the procedure went well, but in all honesty, it was horribly done. The doctor made her hips so wide. Her thighs and waist were really small, so again, it just didn't look proportional. Now the problem is I genuinely don't find her physically attractive anymore and I don't know what to do about it. I want nothing more than to be madly attracted to her as I was years ago. But everything she has done to her body makes her look slightly terrifying to me. I love her and don't think that will change, but I hate having sex with her now. I don't enjoy it, but her sex drive has increased since the barrel, probably because she's more confident now. Meanwhile, mine has basically tanked. I thought of talking to her, but I'm not sure what good that will do besides make her feel bad. There's nothing that can be done now anyway. She's confident and happy in her body for the first time in her life and I don't want to ruin it, so I obviously won't ever say anything to her about this. I love every other aspect of our relationship, so that's just going to have to be enough. I obviously can't say this to anyone in real life, so here I am. Just wanted to get this out. I got my neighbor's car towed and it made them lose their job. About a year ago, a new neighbor moved in next to me. She does not have a driveway and I do, so she has to park her car on the street. Occasionally, I would see her car parked in front of my driveway. Usually I would just park on the street and not say anything, or I would go and ask her to move her car. This went on for a few months, and she eventually got a parking ticket for parking in front of my driveway and stopped blocking my driveway entirely. In May, my neighbor was parking her car in front of my driveway again. I asked her again to please not block my driveway. She said she would make no promises because she didn't know how to park on the street. I told her that she needed to learn how to park better because she lived in a neighborhood where that was the only option for most people, and that it wasn't my problem that she didn't know how to parallel park. She got extremely angry and all of the goodwill between us stopped after that argument. At the beginning of July, she started a new job where she had to work nights, and our schedules were now totally opposite of one another. I would come home and her car would always blocking my driveway, and when I went to leave for work in the morning her car would always be blocking my driveway. After about a week of not being able to access our driveway, I asked my husband and he said it would be best to just let it be because working nights is stressful and she's probably under a lot of stress starting a new job. I didn't agree with this, but I kept my cool. About 2 weeks ago, I got home from a bad day of work very angry and decided to do something about it. I called the police and let them know that someone was blocking my driveway. They said they would send out a tow truck to have the car moved. The tow truck driver began to pick up the car, and as this was happening my neighbor ran out screaming and begging with the tow truck driver to not take it because she would lose her job. I felt no regret. She was doing something illegal and had already got a ticket for this once before. She had her warning. The tow truck driver just told her it would be $800 to pick up the car from the city lot. This whole time she was saying some pretty mean things to me, calling me names, calling my husband names, and threatening us. I have not seen the car on the street ever since. A few days ago, I saw her outside and she began screaming at me telling me that she lost her job. I said that I was sorry for what happened, but that it was her fault for blocking my driveway. My husband and I talked about it, and he said that while he was on my side he felt that I was an asshole for getting her car towed and making her lose her job, and that we should at least pay her the $800 to get her car back. I'm not sure if they added on extra fees for storing the car for this long now, and I don't think we should pay her anything, because I had already tried. My wife is depressed and I am losing my attraction to her. My wife of 15 years has severe depression and I have been what I consider to be her caregiver for about 6 years now. I consider myself to be her caregiver because she no longer works or helps out around the house and needs constant attention and emotional support when I am home, and as much support as I am able to provide when I am not home. She has been working with a therapist and psychologist on a weekly basis for almost 10 years now, but her symptoms have gotten progressively worse. Medicines, specialized treatments, and coping techniques have failed to help to a significant degree. I'm not without my struggles and suffer from depression and anxiety as well, so I know where she's coming from and understand her to a degree, although my symptoms are not as severe as hers. I work full-time to support us and do all the chores around the house, take care of all the finances, make all of the necessary appointments, run all of the errands, and also help her do things that a non-depressed person would consider normal, like being in the bathroom with her because she doesn't want to be alone, helping her shower, and listening for hours every day about how miserable she is, but she assures me it's not because of me. I am truly grateful that I am able to support her in this time of struggle, but I'm getting so tired. I want so badly for her to be happy and feel like a failure of a husband because I can't do it. Honestly, I have stopped trying as hard, so that could be contributing to it, so that makes me feel worse. I no longer try to surprise her with gifts or activities, hardly try to joke around with her or try to make her laugh because it all seems pointless. I haven't kept in contact with my friends and no longer go out or do much on my own for fun. Due to limited finances, and somewhat due to time constraints, I am unable to pursue my own few hobbies and feel little joy or excitement for them anymore. What happened to the smartest kid in your class? There were two. They were twins. They're both geneticists now with PhDs, and they work at the same university. The smartest kid in my school was really popular, and was one of my closest friends. But when he graduated he left everyone and everything behind, including his family. He even changed his name. I found out this little bit of information because a friend went to an academic conference and showed me a group photo and he was in it. I exclaimed, "That's my friend Pascal." He kept his first name but his last name was an anagram of his original name. The guy dropped out of college to marry and support the much younger woman he got pregnant. Now, 30 years later, owns a board game store with a large back room for mini painting and games and plays dad to half the neurodivergent kids in town. Still married to the same woman too. It's not a high-flying life, but he makes a difference to so many people. He was smart enough to never associate with people from high school, again. He has never attended a reunion and it's been over 30 years. There are two. I remember one of them crying when they got an A on a test in like 7th grade. One of them, the one who cried, is an executive in a Fortune 500 company. Nothing special but making a lot of money. The other one is a brain surgeon.
Men of Reddit, how did you get caught hard by your crush? So I'm currently in college and I started talking to this cute girl that sat next to me in my lecture. We sit near the back of the lecture room and there's around 300 people in the class, so we rarely pay attention. But anyways, yesterday I was hanging out with two of my boys at the mall and we were just walking around shopping for some new clothes. As we're walking out of one of the stores, my homie pushes me and yells out, "Look, it's your girlfriend over there." I was pretty confused why he was saying that because I didn't have a girlfriend. I looked over to where he was pointing and I saw it was my crush from my lecture class. I immediately got nervous and tried to walk the opposite direction to try to avoid her because I honestly didn't know what to say to her at that moment. My friends were dying laughing, creating a scene, and I looked back and I saw she had noticed me and she started to wave at me, motioning me to come over. I didn't want to be rude and I started walking over to her. At the time, I didn't even know I was hard, but I quickly found out and you will not believe how I did. I started talking to my crush and everything was going pretty smooth until out of nowhere one of my friends yelled out, "Yo bro, hide your extra bone." At that moment she looked down and literally gasped. I knew my chances with her were most likely over because of my dumb friend. I started to apologize and told her I just got a little too excited to see her. She asked me if we could talk somewhere private without my friends watching us, and I gladly accepted her request. I told my boys I would be back in a little and my crush started leading me over to the dressing rooms. She brought me into one and she immediately asked me if it was real. I asked her what she was talking about and she said if my package was actually real because she's never seen one that big before. She started poking at it, continuing to ask if it was real or not, and I kept on assuring her it was definitely real. She asked me if she could help me get rid of extra bone and I said,
"What's a sexual fetish you've wanted to try but never had the courage to?" Pretend like my significant other and I are complete strangers. Meet out at a bar, keep the bit up from there and get home and F a stranger who is actually someone I've been with for 5+ years. I've wanted to do it with multiple people. But I don't like doing the deed with strangers and I also don't think I'd be able to see any friends the same after the deed was done. Role-playing, she's a dirty little Porsche 911 and I'm an overpriced gas pump. First she pulls up, then she says honk, honk, open the gas tank, gives me a credit card, and I fill her up. Premium. Exhibitionism. Like just getting it on in front of the window for the whole world to see. But I have bad social anxiety and know way too many people in my town. I don't know what it's called, but have my partner run through the woods while I run after her about 10 seconds later. I eventually catch up to her, tackle her, and primal F her, all consensual of course. My partner works out early in the morning. Her post-workout smell is intoxicating to me, so I want her to come home from the gym and wake me up by sitting on my face and jay me off while I smell and or taste her. Afraid to ask because she's even given me a negative/dismissive reaction when I told her I would like to smell her underwear. Stink to her is pheromones to me, and I don't think she gets that.
Dads of Reddit, how did you find out your son paid to lose it? So my 18-year-old son is currently in high school and he's about to graduate. My son is pretty antisocial and doesn't have that many friends, but finding out he paid to lose it was pretty embarrassing to hear, I'm not going to lie. The way I found out was actually from the principal running a sting operation at school. One day, I got called by the school asking me if I could come in a chat about something my son did while at school. Later that day I came in and my son was already waiting in the principal office with the principal, some random girl, and a few cops. At first I thought my son was caught selling or buying narcotics, but I was completely wrong. The principal started explaining to me that my son paid a decoy to give him a handy in the bathroom. He was dumb enough to fall for the bait even though the girl looked way older than someone who would be in high school. My jaw dropped and I was astonished. I knew my son got no action, but I didn't know he would stoop this low and try to pay to lose it. The principal started showing me all the evidence of my son and the decoy exchanging messages and planning on meeting up. I read through the text messages and his game was absolutely horrendous. The principal is just reading all of his text messages with the decoy out loud, and I heard someone let out a little chuckle. I noticed one of the police officers grinning, saying my son had no game and I should be embarrassed about how he talks to women. You will not believe the punishment the principal and I agreed to give my son. Men of Reddit who have proposed and your girlfriend said no? What happened? I'm honestly in tears writing this at the moment. My girlfriend and I have been dating for the past 3 years and I thought everything was going to well and I wanted to live the rest of my life with her. Turns out she didn't feel the same way and you will not believe how she rejected me. So I planned a nice vacation with her and we went to Disneyland together. I honestly thought proposing at her at Disney would have been super romantic, but I was deeply wrong. I planned on proposing to her on the Sleeping Beauty Castle walkthrough to show everyone how much I loved my girlfriend and how I wanted to spend my life with her. We're going on rides and enjoying ourselves on this amazing vacation. We even did the typical couple cuddling couples do while waiting in line at amusement parks. I loved every second of it. We eventually started making our way to the castle, and I knew this was the perfect time to do it. We got to the bridge and I pretended to drop something and retie my shoe, and as I'm pretending, I reach into my pocket and get the ring out. My girlfriend is just waiting for me to finish tying my shoe and she hadn't noticed the box yet. I looked up at her and she was looking down at me, and that's when I showed her the box and she gave me such a nervous look, like she was embarrassed I was proposing to her. She nervously said yes and everyone started to cheer, but everything went downhill from there. We still kept on going on rides and enjoying ourselves at the park, but I noticed she started to get pretty distant and talking less and less to me. I took this as a red flag because she's never acted this way towards me, and I thought she would be excited to be around me since we'd be married soon. But it started getting dark and we started heading back home. We eventually got back to my car, and that's when she started breaking down into tears, telling me she only said yes because she didn't want to embarrass me in front of a huge crowd. It felt like someone ripped my heart out of my chest and stepped all over it. It felt like the entire world collapsed on me, and I honestly didn't know what to say. I started to break down because I really thought this woman wanted to spend her entire life with me.
My wife made fun of my PP, so I showed it to all her best friends. I'm a pretty attractive man if I do say so myself. My male friends mention it all the time, and throughout college I was always pretty successful with the ladies. Eventually, however, I got tired of sleeping around and I settled down with my girlfriend and now wife in my senior year. Now I do have one minor insecurity, my private parts. Ever since I finished puberty, it's always had a bend at the end of it. It's a normal size, probably bigger than average. It just looks a little weird. My wife was really surprised the first time she saw it, and she occasionally pokes fun at me for it in private, which I never really minded. That changed when we went to a friend's birthday party a few weeks ago. He really went overboard with a drink situation and pretty much everybody was at least a little bit tipsy. We were all laughing and having a good time when out of nowhere, my wife makes a comment about how my PP hangs weird. I was shocked, and I was even more shocked and humiliated when all my friends started laughing while she described it and how strange it was driving home that night. I asked her why she would humiliate me like that in front of all of our friends. She pretty much told me to suck it up and that it wasn't a big deal. I didn't like that at all. I thought that we understood each other, but if she couldn't show me some basic respect and understand how I feel, then I needed to find someone. Who would you see? My wife has a bunch of unmarried friends who I knew were at least somewhat attracted to me, and they were more than happy to meet with me one-on-one and talk about how my wife wasn't fulfilling my needs both emotionally and legally. Well, one thing led to another and I ended up sleeping with at least 6 of her single friends over the course of a few weeks. She found out about it a few days ago and flipped out on me. I just told her that I knew she thought my PP was weird, but I wanted a few other opinions. Today I effed up by accidentally joining the Ku Klux Klan. Now I want to get something out of the way from the start. I'm not racist, not even a little bit. Yes, I am white, but I have no prejudice against any race and have friends of every ethnicity. I'm just stupid. I live in the deep south and I'm a huge frat guy. My fraternity is pretty much everything to me. If it wasn't for the parties, I would have pretty much no reason to be at college. But recently, my party lifestyle finally caught up with me. My grades completely tanked in my second year of college, and they dropped below the minimum that my fraternity required to remain an active member. I got kicked out and I felt like my life was over. I pretty much moped around through classes and worked for the next few weeks. I genuinely didn't feel like life was worth living if I couldn't party and spend time with my best friends. One day when I was leaving work at the supermarket, I ran into a young guy pretty much my age, handing out pamphlets outside the building. I took one, but never read it because I hate reading. We struck up a conversation and he told me he was recruiting for the Ku Klux Klan and that I looked like a great potential member. This got me super excited. The name sounded like one of those Greek or Latin fraternity names, and I was super stoked that they wanted me in. I agreed to join, and the man said that they were having a get-together at their clubhouse that very night and invited me to attend. I accepted and instantly stocked up on beer and hard lemonade since I wanted to impress my potential new frat brothers when I got there. However, I was really surprised by the fact that almost everyone seemed a lot older than I was. There were also a lot of weird symbols on the walls. I thought they were just frat logos at first, but I did some research later and found out it was called a swastika, and it was a hate symbol. I was most confused by the fact that there wasn't any alcohol besides what I had brought, and no one was playing beer pong or doing anything cool. Instead, everyone had brought a book called the Turner Diaries, and they were sitting in a circle talking about it like in class. I realized that this was a club for nerds or something, and left pretty much immediately. It was only when I googled them later. Then I found out they were white nationalists. Oops.
Men of Reddit, what is the dumbest way you have managed to get laid? I let a girl eat some of my ramen at a party. She insisted on having more and I told her there was plenty more back at my apartment, so I just picked up my dog from Petco after getting him groomed and ran inside to pay my bill and pick up some dog treats. The girl at the register was clearly having a bad day. We chatted up a bit and she explained she just got dumped by a guy over a tattoo. I told her that I was having a bad day too, and if she wanted to give me a call after she is off and I'll buy her a beer later that evening. She sent me a text asking if I wanted to see the tattoo. She got dumped over. I said yes. She then sent me a picture of a pair of wolf paws tattooed on her chest. I just responded nice, and she then asked if I wanted to see them in person. My friend was at the club, and he's the kind of guy that doesn't go to clubs at all. He saw a girl on the dance floor he liked, and we all told him he should go talk to her. He went down, and 10 minutes later we see him walking out the club with the girl he liked. We were all shocked. He got a girl the first try. The next day we asked what happened, and he told us. He just complimented how good her belly button looked. My buddy used to try to do this thing at the bar where he would dance his butt into girls and hope they'd start dancing with him. It never worked even one time, but one time I was standing on the edge of the dance floor and he was trying to do it to this girl, and she grabbed onto me and pulled me into her and whispered in my ear, "Pretend to be my boyfriend," so that my friend would go away. My friend left and I danced with her all night and then spent the rest of the weekend with her. Men of Reddit, how much did you pay the school SLT for intercourse and was it worth it? 18-year-old short dude here. I have to say that I paid to get a little action. My reasons were as good as any other teenage male my age. I just wanted some play in the big leagues. Most of the popular girls who were known for giving out intercourse had graduated, so I had to settle for one of the juniors. I followed her on IG one day and messaged her if she was interested in giving me a session. She agreed, and after AP Physics, I stayed after and we walked out together. It was lunch period. However, we went straight to the gym as it is always empty around lunchtime. I initially had paid for just a BJ, so she gave me top and finished. She swallowed and gave me a hickey on the neck. However, I still had my V card and was wondering if I could lose my V card while I was at it. She said that she doesn't normally do intercourse as she was on her cycle. However, if I gave her double, she would do it. I was going to use this money to get my best friend the Lego Star Wars kit for his birthday, but I had to make a decision. I paid for it. It was $200. We went back to the gym and into the locker rooms and made sure no one was in there. She starts taking it all off and soon she is completely bare and suggests that I do the same. Things got pretty steamy and the most unexpected thing happened. Men of Reddit. What is the most random shul encounter you've ever had? I was driving home in the rain when I saw an attractive woman dressed in the typical college girl party dress, walking all by herself on the street, arms crossed, no jacket. I swing around and ask if she's okay. She looks but ignores me as she crosses the street towards the gas station. I pull in front of her, telling her that I work for the local newspaper. So she gets in my car, soaked and bawling her eyes out. She tells me her friends left her at the bar. She lost her cell phone, didn't have her purse, and couldn't find where she parked. She was somewhat disoriented, but I told her I would drive her to her friend's house, which turned out to be 40 minutes away, being her knight in shining armor for the night. She told me she had an argument with her boyfriend a few days ago and that she was very grateful for everything I did for her. Me being stupid, I didn't catch the hint. She repeated what she said, but this time with a much hotter voice. Well, I got that hint, and I proceeded to pull over and bang the crap out of her in the backseat of my car while going at it. She told me she's on birth control and wanted it deep, still a bit buzzed. I fulfilled her wishes and finished twice inside her after getting back on the road and getting close to her.
Am I the jerk because I got my daughter a $80 dress? My family just got back from a week-long cruise, and there is still some tension about this. My wife and I took our 20-year-old son, 16-year-old daughter, 13-year-old son and 7-year-old son. Our oldest spent most of his time on vacation doing his own thing, having breakfast and dinner with the family but being seldom seen otherwise. My wife and I enjoyed spending time without kids, but we also did some couples activities. There are clubs on the boat for kids, and our 13-year-old really enjoyed them, but our 7-year-old didn't and kept wanting to spend the day with his sister, who we'd given carte blanche to do her own thing as long as she ate with us and answered when we messaged her. She was a good sport and took her little brother on most of her adventures, swimming with him, taking him to trivia and doing the animation classes with him. I felt like this was very sweet of her and showed a great deal of maturity. The second to last day of the cruise, I took her to the gift shop and told her to pick out whatever she wanted as thanks for looking after her brother. She was very excited and ended up picking out a dress. The dress was $80. She wore it to dinner that night, and when she told her mom I bought it for her, my wife gave me a weird look. After dinner she asked me why the hell I did that. I explained that it was a reward for looking after her brother. She said we can't buy an $80 dress for our daughter and nothing for our sons. I said we didn't get them nothing, we took them on a cruise. My wife said I'm an idiot. I don't think so. We got some trinkets for the younger boys, about $20 worth of stuff. My wife thinks I effed up and said I should apologize to the boys. I refuse. We took our adult son on a vacation that cost thousands of dollars. He has no reason to resent his sister being rewarded for being thoughtful. If we got our 7-yo and 13-yo a really expensive souvenir, it would probably be lost or broken. She still thinks I was in a hole though. I ate out my girlfriend so hard it sent me to the emergency room. So this Friday evening my girlfriend and I were having a great night. We were in the middle of doing the deed and I was all the way downtown and determined to make her finish. I suddenly felt a teeny tiny snap or crack in my jaw and thought absolutely nothing of it. There was barely any pain. I didn't even consider it worth mentioning at the time. When we finished, we went to bed excited for the rest of the weekend. Saturday was also fine for the most part. We did a bunch of shopping in preparation for a camping trip this upcoming Wednesday. I needed comfy shoes for walking around on mud and rocks, so I purchased some bright orange Crocs and joked that wearing them is effectively an advertisement that I was taken. We had ramen for lunch. Maybe I didn't notice any pain during lunch because I had soup, but when I got home and had a solid snack I suddenly felt intense pain on the left side of my face. I could no longer bite down on my back teeth either. I told my GF that I first felt something the other night and she half-jokingly apologized and said it was probably worth it. The pain remained on Sunday but I had to work. It mostly hurt while I was eating, so talking all day wasn't too bad. I managed to slowly eat a banana for breakfast by mushing it against the roof of my mouth with my tongue. I had a beer for dinner. Today is Monday and it's getting progressively worse. I was scrambling all day to see a doctor at various walk-in clinics but ultimately managed to get a last-minute appointment with my family doctor. His diagnosis is that it's probably swelling around my TMJ and that it's unlikely that my jaw is dislocated, so he prescribed some painkillers and set me up for scans throughout the week. He also unnecessarily thanked me 4 times for sharing why I think this happened, tried to mime out what a jaw looks like when it's all over a kitty cat for his own benefit, and then reassured me the office wasn't being recorded. When I got home and ate some pho, I realized the pain was continuing to creep up despite the painkillers. So I'm sitting 2+ hours in the ER now and not going home unless a doctor fixes my jaw or confidently breaks the news that I need to be on a liquid diet for the next couple weeks. My GF is talking to her friends and they're already saying that if I die, at least I died doing what I loved. They are calling me a hero. My camping trip is likely cancelled. Am I the jerk for not inviting my friend to my party because she would ruin the aesthetic? I, 29F, started a small online book club for book lovers in my city about a year ago. I know it sounds a little nerdy but it's not like that. We're all just some girls who like to read and share our thoughts, especially on historical fiction. Well, I've been seeing a lot of those book balls on TikTok recently where people throw huge parties where everyone dresses up extravagantly in ball gowns and those intricate masks and parasols and whatnot, and thought it looked super fun, only there weren't any being held anywhere near me, so I decided to hold an intimate one with the girls from my book club. There are about a dozen of us and we've met up multiple times, so we're all good friends. One of these girls is a close friend of mine, I'll call her Sam, 29F, and she does not like to dress up at all. She's always in sweats or athletic clothes, never does her makeup or hair, just doesn't really care about her appearance even for formal events. I remember she skipped our prom and wore jeans to our ceremony, which is fine, she's a beautiful girl. But I didn't want that at my ball, so I didn't invite her. I sent out beautiful invites that I spent a good chunk of money for, rented out a small hall that fit my budget, catered, and only asked my friends to pitch in about $20 each to cover some costs. Everyone bought beautiful extravagant gowns and accessories, and I got even more excited. Well, eventually word somehow made it to Sam and she asked me about the event. She asked if I was really hosting an event for the book club and not inviting her, and after hesitating I said yes, but only because I know she would never wear a ball gown or put effort into looking good. She said she was upset that I wouldn't want her there even if she wore her regular clothes, and I told her that that's not fair, that I put in all of this effort for a beautiful event where everyone can be a little extra for one day, and I didn't want her to ruin the aesthetic. She hasn't spoken to me since then, and the ball was 2 days ago, a success BTW. Everyone looked amazing. Am I the jerk for not inviting her because she would ruin the event?
Men of Reddit. How did you find out the girl you were with wasn't actually a girl? I decided to reward myself by taking a vacation to Thailand because I recently got a promotion at my job. All my friends were laughing at me, telling me I was only going there just for the ladyboys. I've been in the heart of Thailand for around a month, and I've honestly enjoyed learning about the new culture. I'm a straight guy, so ladyboys were off the list, and majority of the ladyboys told me they were ladyboys before anything escalated to the next step. But I had an itch down there that needed to be scratched, so I decided to learn a naughty side of the culture. I looked up nearby massage parlors that offered happy endings. Yes, I know that's pretty down bad, but I'm in Thailand and it's completely legal here, and why not get a massage and let out one at the same time? So a win is a win. But anyways, I got to the massage parlor and the employee at the front desk handed me a menu. It had a bunch of options and I saw the happy ending section. It was $30 just for the massage and an extra $15 for a happy ending that included everything a guy could want. Anyways, I told the cashier that I wanted the full body massage and he led me to the massage room. The masseuse was a pretty attractive woman and she had a nice pair on her, I'm not going to lie. I took off everything and the massage started. I was enjoying every second of this massage and it was finally time for me to lay on my back to begin my happy ending. The masseuse rarely talked and I kind of found that odd, but I thought she was just shy because I'm a pretty attractive dude. But she told me I had such a nice Eiffel Tower and she wanted to help me out with the extra bone I had. I immediately knew something was wrong because her voice was pretty deep and it finally made sense why she rarely talked. I was so excited to get a happy ending I didn't even bother asking the cashier if ladyboys worked in the parlor. But it was already too late because she was already touching it and she asked me if I liked ladyboys. I nervously said yes because I was low-key enjoying it and I didn't want to waste my money and call off the massage. Out of nowhere. Men of Reddit, how did you organize 3 girls to sleep with you at once? So I'm a 6'2" pretty attractive guy in college and I'm also in a frat. Getting girls is pretty easy because we throw parties every day and I'm pretty well known on campus. My college is a big party school, so I'm always meeting new girls. My frat brothers and I had a bet to see how many of us could sleep with the most girls at once. The most I've ever done in one night was get with 2 girls, but they were at different times. But we were throwing a party this weekend, and I had the bright idea to just try to pick up as many girls I could this night. I got around 15 girls' Snapchats literally using the same pickup line, and they all fell for it. But anyways, you might be wondering how I got with 3 of them at once. I decided to message all of them to come back to the house after the party was done. A lot of them told me they couldn't come back and just wanted to go back to their dorms. But 3 of them were down to come back, so I was pretty excited. I told all of them to come within 5 minutes of each other so they wouldn't all show up at the house at the same exact time. My plan was going pretty well. The first girl showed up, I brought her to my room. We started to talk, and the next girl started knocking on the door, so I went to open it for her and led her back to my room. The first girl was pretty confused on why another girl from the party was also here, so I just played it off like she was a friend. We're all talking, and the third girl knocked on the door, so I excused myself and went to bring the third girl in the room. When I opened the door to my room, I saw the 2 girls were going at it. They said they got bored while waiting for me to come back and wanted to spice things up. They were pretty happy I brought another girl, and they said we could join them. Them saying that was the last thing I was expecting. Surprisingly, the third girl was down and things got pretty steamy pretty fast. Midway through, I started hearing bangs on the door. I quickly,
Am I the jerk for not letting my daughter pursue modeling? I, 44F, have a daughter, 18F, and a son, 15M. My daughter was scouted by a modeling agency when she was 15. Since then, she has been doing modeling jobs, including local ads and even fashion shows. She has walked in shows in New York and Paris. The money is minimal, but my husband and I put it all into a savings account for her college tuition. When she was a kid, she always wanted to be a software developer like her dad. She had stellar grades in high school math, physics, and in April was accepted into a prestigious computer science undergraduate program at a great university. We were all overjoyed for her. She accepted the offer and everything. Today, she told me and my husband that she wanted to defer admission for a year and focus on modeling. Her agency has been pressuring her to relocate to New York City because there are more opportunities/jobs there. I was adamant that she enter school in September instead of moving to NYC to model. I told her she would be wasting a year of her life when she could be spending her time getting her degree. She argued with us further and said that now she's 18, she will use her savings to move to New York. I told her those savings were for her college tuition, not for her to waste paying thousands in rent and accomplishing nothing. She said it's not like you guys can't afford to pay for my tuition yourselves. My husband thinks we should let her do it, and start school next year. I am strictly against it. I think it will be a waste of her life and most importantly, I will worry for her safety. She is 18 but still so naive. Ida, for putting my foot down on this matter, am I the jerk for snapping back at the special needs kid? I, 27F, work in retail. There is a guy here, who I'll call Boy, 21M, that no one likes. Boy doesn't like to work. He likes to socialize and avoid doing his actual job under the guise of helping associates. He's been reprimanded a few times, by his own admission, for this. Even customers will ask if he's working to specifically avoid him. It also should be noted that B is on the spectrum, and has some other mental health issues. Boy can be a very nice kid, when he wants to be. But most of the time, and I hate to say it, he's a D. Purposefully rude, annoying and just all around not super fun to be around. Now, I understand that people on the spectrum, myself included, don't always know when they're being rude, and I've pointed it out to him on a few occasions and he just shrugs and goes, I don't care. I'd rather be honest. He shows up an hour or two before his shift to socialize and be a nuisance, which fine. Doesn't bug me. He comes up to me yesterday, and we start talking. He asks me if I'd like to go to his church, which I politely declined. I'm not religious, and think organized religion is a sham. He kept pressing, saying that my kids would benefit from knowing the word of God and blah blah. I just ignored it and kept declining. I asked him if he could do me a favor, get me some ice from the back for my cup. I can't leave my desk, as I'm the only one in the morning. He says no, I'd rather not waste my time on you, and walks away. Lunchtime comes, and I'm sitting in the break room with my cashier, Tally, 58F. He comes in and starts talking, which most people ignore. He then looks at our table and starts talking shit about how he gets to go home and we're stuck here so we should be jealous of him, plus a couple other things I can't remember. Before I could stop myself, I asked, why would any of us need to be jealous of you? And he just looked at me, a little hurt. He didn't say much after that and left. Hallie said I didn't do anything wrong with what I said, but I feel guilty because I'm not normally an auto boy. Men of Reddit, what's the most down bad you have ever been? I started talking to this girl one night after she messaged me through social media. We began talking about common interests with subtle flirting here and there. The following day, I asked her to send a photo of herself. She proceeded to send 4 pictures, 2 of which she was in baggy clothing, the other 2 being top angles. All of these photos had 2 things in common, all had filters and all hid what everything below her neck looked like. I instantly suspected she was a beluga. After talking for a little while, our conversation shifted to a more intimate context. She told me about some of her fantasies, such as getting tied down and tickled. I refused to follow through with that one, but told her I'd fulfill some of her other ones. We made a plan for her to sneak over while my parents were out of my house the next day. Well, the next day rolls around and we talk about her coming over, which she later does. After waiting an hour for her bus to get to my house, I waited outside so she knew which house was mine. As she walks to my driveway, I noticed something about her. Not only was she hiding her body for good reason, but she was also very unattractive in person. Maybe a solid 2 out of 10 to put the cherry on top of the cake. She smelled like a mix of body odor and cigarettes. Me not wanting to be rude, as she had just traveled across town to do the devil's tango. Walked her into my house, into my room. We put on a show on Netflix and began following through with what we had previously talked about, excluding the tickling. After finishing up what was and will be my worst intimate experience ever, we both just sat there. The post-note was crazy. I actually went into my bathroom and took a long and hard look at myself in the mirror. I'm pretty sure a tear even streamed down my eye. I came back out and sat down. I sat there thinking about how I could get her out of my house without being rude. I finished a glass of water and said I was going to go fill it. I quickly pulled out my phone and bribed my sister to come knock on my door and tell me my parents were home early and that they needed me to help them unload groceries. I told her I was sorry and that I needed to go help. I told her to take the next bus, which was 20 minutes later. For the next 2 hours, I sat there smelling like her and deeply regretting everything I'd just done. This inspired me to go do household chores to keep my mind off of what happened. Have you ever made fun of a suicide victim? A month or so ago, one of my coworkers took time off of work because her 17-year-old son tragically passed away. I live in a small town, so words gets around fast. Apparently her son was facing a lot of bullying in school and was outcast by everyone due to reports of him engaging in intimate activities with a goat. Whether these rumors are true or not, I will never know. I assume he was battling depression from it all, as well as having his reputation be tarnished forever. He managed to get a hold of a firearm and tragically took his life with it. His mother was the one who found him in his room. Today was her second day back at work. This morning, I gave her my condolences and we all expressed our grief towards her and tried helping her settle back into work. Towards the end of my 10-hour shift, I was very exhausted and decided to sit down. My coworker and I made eye contact, not thinking. I put my fingers to my head and pretended to squeeze the trigger as the universal sign of this sucks. As soon as I did that, I realized my mistake. She immediately got a horrified look on her face, and I turned away immediately. She rushed over to me crying and attempted to slap me for my actions, something I cannot even blame. One of the other coworkers saw her attempt this and managed to restrain her. She actually teared up, but managed to explain through it all what I did, and when she did, the other coworker was just as horrified, so much so, the other coworker actually slapped me. Instead, at the end of the day, I got written up for my behavior and I'm now set to meet up with the manager as well as my coworker to discuss my actions. Not a great way to end my Friday. Redditors, what's the freakiest thing you've done in bed? Let a sorority girl handcuff me to the bed, knowing she didn't have the key. Her sisters cut me out with bolt cutters later that evening. I was in my 20s. I met a couple, FM, with which I decided to have a three-way with. It was my first time with a couple, so I was nervous. But they offered drinks and pot and massaged me to help me relax, super shy and anxious to start until I warm up to my partner. We talked first, including safe boundaries. Eventually, she made the first move. I made sure to be very attentive to the as I had heard many female friends tell me they felt like they became third wheels when experimenting in bed. In a threesome, those girls began just watching their BF screw someone while they felt ignored, and I didn't want that. I wanted this to be enjoyable for everyone, so I really tried to service both but favor her just a bit more. I never ignored her or left her out at any moment. Never stopped touching her. She eventually passed me off to him, and at some point the pod and group makeout session led out to the in-ground pool in the backyard. They had an extra tall fully enclosed fence and plenty of foliage surrounding the large yard. It was perfectly blue sky sunny weather with only a small puff of cloud here and there. She walked onto the pool deck and slowly stripped down to nothing before jumping into the pool. As I watched her, he helped me undress. Then I jumped in. He soon followed. I was super stoned and relaxed. At some point, I was lifted back out of the pool onto a towel with my ass hanging over the edge of the pool wall. It made my hips the perfect height for face level of anyone in the pool. He was face deep between my thighs while his GF was under the water blowing him when I heard a noise coming from above. I was laid back taking it all in and feeling the warm sun on my skin, but trying to sober up to determine what I was hearing. Then I saw this small private plane flying overhead. For a moment, I panicked. As someone who usually had bad anxiety and was self-conscious about my body, I briefly tensed up at the idea of people filming or watching. But as I focused my eyes and saw how far the plane was, and I felt his tongue dig deeper into me, it was hard to care. I melted into his face as I felt watched. It was hot AF. In that moment I felt no shame. I felt like a goddess. I knew servicing me to completion was a top priority for them as much as it was for me to return the favor. We were just three consenting adults enjoying their youth in a private residence.
I have an intimate relationship with my childhood bully's mother, and it's effing awesome. I'm 24 and male. For context, as a young teen, he used to gang up with his friends and bully me for literally no reason. Well, we eventually grew up and school ended. But honestly, the bullying still FS with me. About 2 months ago, I recognized his mom at a bar. She's one of those young and hot moms, and I'm not the shy I used to be. She doesn't know who I am or what her son did. She was single and we hit it off, and she came to my place that night and I piped her like it was our wedding night even years later. Iffing hate her son so much and dogging his mom has been incredible. And even though I did this initially purely for revenge, she's actually a wonderful person, and I want to see where this goes and hopefully at least be able to be civil with him. She told me she has a son about my age early on, which I know obviously. And this week she asked, since we've been together for a couple months and are serious, if I wanted to meet him this weekend. I said sure, we're having dinner Saturday night, and I'm equally excited and nervous. I feel bad that this started as petty revenge because she deserves better than that. But the fact is, her son's a effing loser. I grew up, I got in better shape, I have a decent job and make good money while he still lives with his mom and doesn't work well. He's going to be in for a big surprise this weekend. She mentioned he was already uncomfortable that her new boyfriend is his age, but oh man, is he in for a world of hurt? Especially when I eventually become his stepdad, move into that house and tell him he needs to either get a job or get out as his stepdad. I won't let him be a burden to his mother anymore. And when he hears how vocal his mom is during SX, he's going to want to move out anyway unless he enjoys hearing me breed his mother every night. This weekend is going to be great. I can't wait to see the look on his face.
My family didn't get me a wedding gift, so I didn't go on vacation with them. I, 29F, married my husband, 30M, about 7 months ago. We had a big wedding, welcome guest party the day before, brunch, etc., all covered by us. My husband's aunts on one side and all of his cousins came, 9 people total, and did not even get us a card. We have gone to multiple weddings for people in this family and have paid for our flights, hotels, some were destinations, and given at least $300 every time. It honestly made me sick to my stomach when we saw that they didn't get us a literal $2 CVS card. My husband was bummed for a minute but then just got over it. He's an oh well kind of guy with pretty much anything. My husband recently said they were all catching up over text and asked us to go on a cruise with them in March, saying they would love to see us. I told my husband I'm not comfortable with that after what happened with the gifts at our wedding. He scoffed and said that no one necessarily deserves a wedding present and we should be happy they came. Personally, these are not really people I want to be close with. I image that we will get stuck paying for everything, as we have in the past, since there is just little care. I feel like they tend to often be selfish and use us for things, and I don't really want to spend my money and vacation time on a cruise with them versus doing something else. A lunch, fine, but not a whole vacation. It isn't that I need an expensive gift. One guest brought us these wine glasses that she found at a thrift store for $4 and they are beautiful and one of my favorite gifts. Not only are they beautiful, but you can tell how much thought she put into the gift and wrapping. It's that they came and didn't even bother to get us a card or really wish us well. It just feels disrespectful. My husband is upset with me and says he can't really go by himself since it's all couples. We're at an impasse. Ida for refusing to go on the cruise because they didn't get us a wedding card or present. Men of Reddit, what's the biggest hint you've ever missed from a woman? I worked as a bouncer 25-ish years ago. One evening a slightly older and extremely attractive lady came back to the club and said that her car would not start. Eventually, after chatting for about 15 minutes and just before closing, I offered her a ride, out of sheer politeness and because I saw her tip bartenders really well. When we got to her house she asked if I would like to get some water. I said okay and went into her house. After the glass of water she asked if I would not mind unbuttoning the top hook on the back of her blouse because she couldn't reach it. I did. Then I said, "Thank you very much, have a good evening." And left. Never saw her again even though she was a fairly consistent customer until that evening. It clicked only years later when a date asked me to help with the top hook on the back of her blouse. I must have stood there for a solid minute with an absolutely idiotic look on my face because she kept asking me what's wrong. I was in class, a girl asked if we could study together for a minor quiz at her place. A friend overhears and asks if he can join us. I say yes immediately before she can say anything. She sends us her address and a time. I show up and she answers the door in a bikini. Nobody else at her place. She says she was sunbathing and asks me into her room while she changes. I look away to be polite and then make small talk once she's done. My friend shows up 30 minutes later. Turns out she told him that the study group started 30 minutes after what she told me. Sigh.
Men of Reddit, where did you lose your V-card? I remember the day well. 23 years later. It was February 17th of the year 2000. My friend told me that her mom was out and we could bang if I came over right away. It was like 9:20 at night and I said F it. I told my dad that my friend had a computer issue and I needed to help her real quick so she could finish an assignment and ran out while he was still grumbling. I get to her place and she points to her couch and says, "We'll do it there." The thing about her place was her mom was a hoarder, so there were books and trinkets stacked everywhere. In retrospect, their place was filthy, but 18-year-old me had a D to give and I was going to deliver. My friend lays down, I pull up her dress and she tells me to drop my pants and hands me the protection. So there I am, fumbling to roll on my protection in the middle of her dark living room. When I look over and notice her cat staring at me, I didn't even care that the cat was judging me because I was about to plow her human. I get the protection on and waddle over to her because who actually takes their pants off? I begin to lay on top of her when she tells me to pause for a moment while she puts on some music. So there I was on my friend's couch, losing my V-card while listening to garbage with her cat, watching the best 37 seconds of my life. We finish up and I apologize that I didn't last long and she said something about her not expecting much given it's my first time. I went back home and hoped no one would realize that I had just done the deed. I went back to her place the next day and when she opened the door I said, "We need to do it again, but better." She just stepped to the side to let me in and we banged it out on that sofa again. This time for something like 20 minutes. We did the deed whenever I was single for years. I honestly should have married that girl. She was a fantastic friend and we both low-key loved each other beyond friendship. Megan, if you're on Reddit reading this, thanks for always being such a good friend and I'm sorry I sucked as a friend at the end when you were moving away. Men of Reddit who had intercourse with a woman that wasn't actually a woman. What happened? So at the time of this story I was 21 and I had just recently moved into a new city and I was sightseeing for a job. It was around the ending of the mask era, so people were still working but had to have masks on. I found a cubicle job that paid pretty well and I had the required experience for it. I went through the interview process and everything went pretty smoothly and I got the job. Fast forward to my first day of work, I got placed between this much older woman and a woman around my age. I introduced myself to them and I felt an instant connection with the woman around my age. I could barely see her face because of her mask, but from what I could see she was pretty attractive and she was my type. She had black bangs and decently long hair. She was a solid 9 out of 10 in my books. But in the following weeks we started getting to know each other and I found something pretty odd about her. Sometimes we would be talking and out of nowhere her voice would get deeper, but she would just giggle it off and I didn't think anything of it. Looking back, I definitely should have said something or at least view her voice changing out of nowhere as a red flag. But eventually we exchanged numbers and we start texting out of work. Everything was going pretty well and we actually had a lot in common, believe it or not. Our text eventually started getting spicy and we started exchanging flirtatious text with one another. One night I was pretty bored and I had the day off. I texted my cubicle buddy if she was at work and she told me she wasn't. I just decided to shoot my shot and invite her over because I knew if she said no I would have been in the same position I was in before. Serpingly, she said she was down and I invited her to my apartment. She arrived 30 minutes later and she immediately went in for a hug. I noticed her grip was pretty tight for a woman, but I thought she was just excited to see me. I led her back up to my apartment and I decided to play a movie while we chatted about life and how much we hated work. We started to cuddle and things got pretty steamy. We were cuddled up and out of nowhere she decided to get on top of me and next thing you know her tongue was down my throat. Midway through the makeout session I felt something pretty heavy on my thigh. I looked down and you will not believe what I saw on the outline of her pants.
I have an intimate relationship with my childhood bully's mother, and it's effing awesome. I'm 24 and male. For context, as a young teen, he used to gang up with his friends and bully me for literally no reason. Well, we eventually grew up and school ended, but honestly, the bullying still F's with me. About 2 months ago, I recognized his mom at a bar. She's one of those young and hot moms, and I'm not the shy loser I used to be. She doesn't know who I am or what her son did. She was single and we hit it off and she came to my place that night and I piped her like it was our wedding night. Even years later, I effing hate her son so much and dogging his mom has been incredible. And even though I did this initially purely for revenge, she's actually a wonderful person and I want to see where this goes and hopefully at least be able to be civil with him. She told me she has a son about my age early on, which I know obviously. And this week she asked since we've been together for a couple months and are serious if I wanted to meet him this weekend. I said, sure. We're having dinner Saturday night, and I'm equally excited and nervous. I feel bad that this started as petty revenge because she deserves better than that. But the fact is her son's a effing loser. I grew up, I got in better shape. I have a decent job and make good money while he still lives with his mommy and doesn't work while he's going to be in for a big surprise this weekend. She mentioned he was already uncomfortable that her new boyfriend is his age, but oh man, is he in for a world of hurt, especially when I eventually become his stepdad, move into that house and tell him he needs to either get a job or get out as his stepdad. I won't let him be a burden to his mother anymore. And when he hears how vocal his mom is during sex, he's going to want to move out anyway, unless he enjoys hearing me breed his mother every night. This weekend is going to be great. I can't wait to see the look on his face.
Men of Reddit, have you ever recognized anyone while scrolling on the hub? So one night I'm in my bed and I'm just scrolling on the hub to find the perfect video. I finally get to page 46 and I finally found a video that I thought looked pretty nice. The thumbnail was pretty intriguing and I was eager to see what the vid was all about. It was one of those videos where the woman hides her face so people don't know she films adult videos. I've always been into the type of videos where the woman hides her identity because I just find it more mysterious. But I was around 1 minute into the video and something just felt completely off. I felt like I knew this woman but I couldn't confirm if I knew her or not because her face wasn't shown in the vid. I start doing some digging and I went on her page and I started going through all of her videos. In all of her videos the dudes were playing different jobs like they were Johnny Sins. I saw a video where a guy was a mechanic, another video he was a doctor, and another vid where the guy was a plumber. After further investigations I came to the conclusion that this was my English professor. And I 100% knew it was her. To give some backstory, I'm currently a junior in college and I'm majoring in English. I'm currently taking a writing class and I have a professor who's a 5'2" blonde with a perfect tan. She always wears the same exact bracelet to class every day and she has a butterfly tattoo on the back of her arm. Believe it or not, the woman in the videos had the same bracelet and tattoo my professor has, even the tan matched as well. I even started watching through all of her videos again to hear her voice, and it sounded very similar to my professor. I just knew it was her. I was so stunned but amazed at the same time because I felt as if I was the only one who knew her secret life outside of work. She had a Snapchat connected to her hub page, so I decided to add it. On her story, I saw that she was looking to record a video with a fan in the area. I swiped up on her story and decided to—
My boyfriend cheated on me with his own mother. My BF and I have been together for almost a year now. We met at my mall food court job and immediately hit it off. After a month of knowing each other, he asked me to be his GF. Of course, I said yes. Our relationship has been pretty great. Up to his point, he takes me on dates, compliments me, and just makes me feel super special. The only weird thing is he would never let me meet his mom. His parents are divorced and have been for almost his entire life. The divorce was messy and his father ended up getting full custody. They had the typical every other weekend and 6 weeks out of the summer setup. I have met his dad and his paternal family, but he would be weird. When I brought his mom up, he would tell me things like, "We have a complicated relationship where I'll tell you about it." Later on, about 3 months into the relationship, I began to realize he would never answer his mother's calls or texts around me. He would hastily clear it out or step into another room to talk to her even if it was just texting. I tried to not let it bother me because I wanted to respect his boundaries. Last week, he spent the night with me for the first time. I woke up around 3 a.m. because of a bad dream and I couldn't go back to sleep. I rolled over to grab my phone in the dark, but accidentally picked his up instead. I looked at the messages from his mother. I opened his phone and began to read through them and noticed they were mostly very sexual. There would be nudes exchanged, hardcore sexting and messages for them to meet up for sex. I read the conversations in disbelief. I tried to pretend like it wasn't real, and I dreamed it. A few days later, I confronted him about it. It didn't take long before he broke down and told me everything. He had been having sex with his mother since he was 13 years old. They usually have intercourse once a week, sometimes more. They've been doing this throughout our entire relationship. He never told her that he had a GF because he wanted them to still have their weekly sessions. At this point, I'd what to do. I love him with all of my heart, but I'm so disgusted with him and his mother. I haven't talked to him since. He told me everything. After he told me, I ran out and drove to a town 2 hours away. I blocked him on every social media and his phone number. I changed the locks to my house. I have also called the weekend to work, so he can't find me. What should I do? Make it work out or break up with him? Update. Thank you everyone for your advice and kind words. I have decided that I'm going to talk to his dad, and in both I'll talk to his father first than him. That way his father can help me figure out what course of action we may need to take. I messaged both of them an hour ago. His father agreed to meet this afternoon. I unblocked my BF and I'm still waiting on a reply from him. I will update later after I talk to them both and decide what we should do.
Men of Reddit, has there ever been a time someone caught you watching the hub? So I live in a 2-story house with my parents, my brother, and my sister. We're all graduated college students and we're just staying at home to save money. My parents are all about no locking doors and they love barging into our rooms without knocking. I have little to no privacy to do anything, so I never watch the hub in my room because I know anyone could come in at any time. The only way I could surf the hub without annoying knowing was to go into the bathroom and act like I was taking a shower. I usually put in headphones so I could have the volume at max to get the full experience of the video, and the sound of the shower canceled everything out. My parents never opened the bathroom door whenever someone was in there, so I knew this was a pretty safe spot to watch those types of videos at. But anyways, I go into the bathroom and I'm doing my regular routine by putting on the shower and looking for a video to watch. It took me around 10 minutes to find a decent-looking video, and I put in my headphones. I'm watching the video and I'm just allowing my right hand to do all the work. Out of nowhere, the sound on my headphones stopped working. I started hitting the volume up and down button, but nothing was working at all. I was confused and I kept on pausing the video to see if that would help, and it didn't. That's when I heard loud noises coming from downstairs. I immediately knew someone turned on my Bluetooth speakers without asking me to use them. My video was already playing for around 1 minute before I finally heard the loud noises coming from downstairs. I closed out the app and turned off the shower and made my way downstairs. That's when I saw my entire family huddled around my speakers with all confused expressions. My mother told me they were trying to use my speakers to play some music to relax. I quickly told her she should have asked me to use my speakers, and that's when my sister immediately yelled out she knew I was on the hub. My entire family gasped and started asking me why I was watching those type of videos in the middle of the day. I started to stumble across my words and I honestly didn't know what to say. My face was bright red and my brother and dad were just laughing hysterically, and my dad even told me my best friend was my right hand. Hopefully things aren't awkward between us and we can get through this together. Men of Reddit, how did you get with the flirty waitress at Hooters? One Friday night my buddy decided to text me if I wanted to go to Hooters. For anyone who hasn't been to Hooters, I recommend it because it's a 10 out of 10 experience, I'm not going to lie. But I replied back to him telling him I was totally down because who doesn't want to eat and get to see amazing views? Anyways, we get to the restaurant and I noticed our waitress was a baddie. She was everything you could imagine in your dream wife. Her top was shaped like the letter P and her bottom half was shaped like the letter D. Imagine putting the letters D and P together, that is what she was shaped like. I'll let your imagination do the work. But the waitress asked what we wanted off the menu and I decided to be corny and asked if she was on the menu. She let out a little giggle and from what I could hear it sounded like a genuine laugh and she wasn't forcing it just to be nice. But I told her what I really wanted off the menu and everything was going pretty smoothly. She kept on checking in on us and I honestly felt a little spark between us. My buddy told me it seems like she was feeling me and she was being pretty flirtatious towards me. I agreed with him and told him I would leave my number on the back of the bill when we were leaving. My buddy and I got separate bills and I was already done eating, so I wrote my number on the back of the bill and left her a $10 tip. My buddy still wanted to get some dessert before we left and I decided to go to the bathroom. Little did I know I was also going to be getting some dessert as well too. The way the bathrooms are set up is there's only 2 bathrooms, one for men and one for women. I knocked on the door and nobody was in there, so I just walked in and started doing my business. Midway through using the bathroom, I heard the door being opened and I immediately said someone was in here. The person decided to hush me and I looked back and saw it was my waitress. I was so confused on what she was doing here, and that's when she got on her knees and asked if she could do something strange for a little bit of Men of Reddit. How did you lose your V card to your PE teacher? So there I was, struggling to put on my football uniform before practice. To give some backstory, I'm a senior and I just wanted to try something new. It was my first time on the team and I had no idea how to get the stupid thing on. I was getting frustrated and then I heard a voice behind me. Need some help there? I turned around and saw this blonde chick in her 20s. She was the PE instructor and she had a smirk on her face. I was kind of embarrassed, but I said yes, please, and she helped me get the uniform on. It was tight and she had to get up close and personal to do it. And then out of nowhere she started taking off my clothes. I was like, whoa, what the hell? And then she saw my huge wood through my pants and she was stunned. I didn't know what to do, so I just stood there frozen, and then she said, "Can I touch it?" And like an idiot, I said yes. And then she started doing her thing with it, but suddenly I heard a few people bust down the door of the locker room. It was the principal and some cops. I knew I was guilty right then and there. We had to awkwardly get dressed in front of them and we were both brought to the principal's office. The principal gave me in-school suspension for 3 days and I heard from a friend the PE instructor was fired from the school. I later found out someone snitched on the PE teacher going into the guy's locker room. That's how we got caught. Pizza delivery drivers of Reddit, have you ever gotten with a customer on the job? So it's currently summer and I'm in college, so I decided to get a summer job at a pizza shop in my town. I'm a delivery driver and at our location it's pretty busy, so I make a decent amount, which is pretty nice, but one day I was working and there was a delivery to a close-by hotel. I always hated going to hotels or motels because those customers usually never tipped and that means I get no extra money. The drivers could see all the deliveries on a screen in the shop and I usually would search up the person's address to see their house size. A big house means they would most likely leave a big tip and I would always handpick the big houses. Yeah, I know, kind of a jerk move, but I gotta put food on the table somehow. Anyways, I noticed it was a hotel delivery and I was the only driver who wasn't on a delivery, so I was forced to take the order. I let out a little sigh and got into my car and started making my way towards the hotel. I arrived and I went to the second floor to find her room. I finally found it after a few minutes and I started to knock on the door. Little did I know I would be getting the best treat of my life. I started hearing shuffling in the room and movement towards the door, and an attractive Brazilian woman answered the door. I could tell she was Brazilian because of her accent and the music she was playing. She answered the door in a silky robe and she was revealing a decent amount. I started to stumble across my words and I could barely keep eye contact because you already know where my eyes were going. She was a solid 9 out of 10 and she was the one I needed, but I didn't know I was going to be the one at the time. But anyways, she told me to bring the pizza inside and she would get me the money for the pizza. I don't know if she put her wallet at the window on purpose, but she bent over and took an extraordinarily long time to get her cash. She was honestly giving me an amazing view and I wasn't complaining. She finally got the cash for the pizza, and that's when she started telling me how her husband was cheating on her and she came here to get her mind off of the situation. I told her I was very sorry her husband wasn't loyal to her and I hope things get better. She told me she wanted to get back at him but didn't know how to. That's when she pushed me onto the bed and asked me.
My boyfriend faked a proposal, so I broke up with him. Me, 24F, have been dating my boyfriend Andrew, 26M, for 5 years now. We've had a healthy and stable relationship, up until today. Andrew has always been a prankster and make jokes with me all the time, and I do it to him too, but today he took it way too far. In the morning he woke me up at 7 a.m. and told me to wake up because he wanted to take me to the spa. I was pretty surprised cause it wasn't a special day or anything, but I was all in for it. At the spa he told me how he wanted to go to a fancy restaurant after we were done at the spa, and that he was paying. Of course, I agreed as we hadn't been out together in a long time. We then got to the restaurant, we had a beautiful and romantic dinner and just a nice time in general. We were talking about a house we were planning to move into and chit-chatted about other stuff too. After around 40 minutes Andrew stood up and got on his knees and took out a box out of his pocket. My heart stopped beating. I hadn't even predicted this. We have never talked about proposal before, but I also thought it was a great time now. He did a speech about how I was the most beautiful girl in the world and how he wanted to live with me forever and ended with, "Will you marry me, my princess?" Of course I said yes. Seconds later all that excitement turned into horror. He opened the small box I expected, he put the ring in and it was a note saying, "You've been pranked." And Andrew started laughing hysterically. He continued with, "Baby, this was just a prank. I'm not ready at all to marry you yet." He was leaning in to hug me but I gave him the biggest slap ever with tears streaming down my face. I just told him, "We're over, you effing scumbag." I am now sitting in my bed crying and writing this and I don't know what to do. He's been texting and calling me but I haven't responded because I feel so sad, betrayed and mostly angry. I thought this was going to be one of the best days of my life. Men of Reddit, how did you accidentally turn your fiancé lesbian? My girlfriend of 6.5 years, fiancé of 1 year, came out as lesbian around a month ago. We were not the best partners towards each other in the end. She was struggling with work-related PTSD, ICU nurse, I was struggling with anxiety. We were often distant from each other. After a few months of general malaise in our relationship, I encouraged her to explore her bisexuality. I always knew she was bisexual and didn't want her to repress it in our relationship. My thought process was that doing so would put her into a better mood, improving our relationship. She found someone on Hinge and they hit it off, fast. Sex every day of the week, spending the night at each other's house, date nights, etc. It quickly became obvious her attraction towards this woman was significantly higher than her attraction towards me. After a few weeks of this, many nights of us crying and trying to figure out what we were now, and weeks of couples consoling, she finally decided to come out as lesbian. We still live together because we bought a house together, effing dumb, parents pressured us, last year and the market has cooled since then. So I'm stuck with my gay ex-fiancé for the next 6 to 12 months at the very minimum. Some days are easy, some are hard. The hardest part is wondering if this would have happened had I been a better partner the past 6 months. She says she's still attracted to me, but she now knows that her attraction towards women is greater. I've since had several dates and sex with other women. It's pretty obvious to me now that my ex was/is gay. That should make me feel better, but it just ends up making me sad. We were a wonderful couple when the going was good, which was a long time, and I feel like many of our issues could have been addressed in therapy. I miss her, I know she misses me. This is hard for her, and it's hard for me. We both wish we could put her gayness, lol, back in a box and forget it ever happened, but life doesn't work like that and it's very likely she would have figured it out at some point, just much later. This is ultimately a good thing, it's just hard in the moment. I miss being her person, I miss hearing about her day. Worst of all, I have to live with the regret I took her for granted towards the end of our relationship. A painful learning lesson I will carry with me for the rest of my life. I want nothing but the best for her, just hard to come to terms that what's best isn't me. I will always love you, E.
My homophobic parents tried to disown me. Thank God I own their house. I've known that I played for the other side pretty much since middle school, but of course I haven't been able to tell my parents that. We live in the middle of nowhere in Kansas, and my parents are hardcore Christian conservatives. I just graduated from high school, and a few months ago they ended up catching me. I was with the only other guy who liked dudes from my school. My mother walked into my room when I thought the door was locked, and she caught me with the guy. The next week was absolutely horrible. My mom couldn't look at me without crying, and my dad kept trying some conversion therapy bull that he got from our pastor. Eventually, though, they sat me down and told me that since I was an adult now, they couldn't just sit there and accept the life of sin that I had chosen for myself. As such, I had 3 days to move out of the house. I was heartbroken until I remembered something my dad had told me when I was younger. See, my dad was all self-righteous about me sitting against God, but he was a pretty big sinner himself. He used to gamble all the time and wouldn't pay off his credit card bills, so his credit score was absolute garbage to get the house we're in now. He had put my name on some of the necessary documents. I went to the bank right after I remembered this to check it out, and they confirmed I did actually own the house and I didn't have to legally leave. I went back to my house and let my parents know the news I recently just found out, and they were just silent because they knew it was true. Hopefully they will accept me one day, but for right now I'm going to be staying at the house I own. Men of Reddit, have you ever subscribed to your sister-only friends? If so, what happened? So one day I'm scrolling through Instagram and I click on the stories. I'm just mindlessly scrolling and my sister's story popped up. It said something about check out her bio. I finally made a page you guys have been waiting for. Being curious, I went to her page and I noticed she had an OnlyFriends link in her bio. At the time, I had no idea what OnlyFriends was and what she was talking about. My sister is a pretty popular social media girl or whatever you call them, so she has a decent following and majority of her fans are men. But anyways, I quickly texted my sister what her story post was all about and she told me to not worry about it. I took that as a red flag and I started to do my research on what OnlyFriends was and my jaw dropped as soon as I read what type of things are posted on that website. My mind was running all over the place and I quickly messaged her back asking why she was posting that type of content for people to see online. To give some context, our family is pretty wealthy and we've never ran into financial problems. I didn't understand why my sister was doing this for money because I knew this would ruin her chances of ever getting a job. Anyways, she told me she didn't post anything crazy and it was just some extra Instagram pictures. I didn't believe that at all and I decided to visit her page and I saw it was $20 per month. I told my friends about the situation and they told me I probably shouldn't buy it because it would be weird seeing pics of your sister on that website. My friends even started joking about the situation, saying they were going to sub to her to help her put food on the table. I was so furious and I knew I had to get to the bottom of this to see if she was lying to me or not. I pulled out my card and started typing in my card details to make the purchase. It went through and the first thing I saw was my sister absolutely getting.
I stuck with my wife through her battle with cancer and now she wants a hall pass. My wife and I have been married since 2001 and together since 1999. She is the most intelligent, thoughtful, caring, loyal person I know, and I have always thought of myself as fortunate to have met and married her. She is even today, aesthetically beautiful, and men have told her this throughout our marriage. She has always shot them down earlier this year. She was diagnosed with uterine cancer stage 1 and had a full hysterectomy. I was never concerned about the cancer. It was diagnosed early, dealt with quickly, and she made a full recovery. I took time off work to look after her after the surgery and all seemed well. There were some to be expected emotional instances on her part. And although I am not an emotional person, we dealt with them together after her recovery. She was insistent that we start living life to the fullest and took a 10-day trip to Europe, followed by a trip to Belize. I am fine with these things, building memories and crossing bucket list adventures off her list. I also understand that these are a result of feeling fragile on her part. She also took up yoga, swimming and healthy cooking classes. I was fully on board until last week. Last week, she came home from work and told me she wanted a hall pass, a one-time opportunity for her to sleep with someone else besides me. She said that since her cancer diagnosis, her outlook on life has changed and she doesn't want to be handcuffed from doing things she wants to do. She explained that there is this guy at her work that she has always had some attraction to. He is leaving the company and she will never see him again. So this is the perfect opportunity to sleep with someone else. She said that I could say no, of course, but that she would be disappointed with me for an indeterminate amount of time and that it would be confirmation of my male toxicity and insecurity. I don't consider myself to be toxic. And if not wanting your wife of over 20 years to sleep with someone else is insecure, then I guess I'm insecure. I told her that I appreciated her talking to me about this, but approval via coercion is not approval. I also said that I do not appreciate her language in describing my as of yet unknown reaction to this very large issue that could affect the rest of our marriage and life together. I got up in the morning. And she basically said that she was sorry for putting such a large decision solely on my shoulders and that to help, she was taking the decision away from me. I immediately sarcastically thought to myself, wow, thanks. That's just what I needed. She booked a hotel near where her co-workers are having a send-off party for this guy and she would spend the night there with him and hope that I would be here when she got back. She told me that she would answer any questions I have about the night after it happened, but not before. She would not tell me who he is or anything about him because she knows me too well. And I will dwell and obsess over him and that would make it too real for me, which is pretty accurate. Her idea was that the less I know the better, which contradicts the offer to tell me anything I want to know after it happened at first. I thought at least she has been honest with me and she has been through a lot since finding out she had cancer. So maybe I should just let it happen. I certainly have no concept of what she went through. So I cannot dismiss how this affected her outlook on life. I even called her best friend to talk about it and she called me callous for just being on the fence about it because I have no idea what she went through after that conversation. I was feeling pretty bad about it all and was going to apologize and give my wife my blessing. But it also happened to be Thursday during NFL season and me and my boys always get together to watch the games before apologizing to my wife. I thought it would be nice to get my mind off of the whole thing and watch some football with my guys. So I went to my friend Jerry's house and we had a few beers and then I let it spill about what was going on. Jerry was the first to react. His jaw dropped to the floor and he just said, "Are you joking?" I shook my head. Then Kevin, who was my best man, shook his head and said, "Dude, cancer or no cancer. That's totally messed up. You've been married for 20 years now. It's way too late to spring something like that on you." Larry, who never really got along well with my wife, just said, "I told you she was a crazy man." You got to dump her if she goes through with it after he said that, I responded. Come on, Larry. That's way too far, and looked around the room for approval from the rest of the guys. None of them were in agreement with me. In fact, they all more or less agreed with Larry. I then told them what her best friend had said to me. Kevin was just like, dude, she's her best friend. Of course, she's going to take her side. Why would you even talk to her? That's like being in an echo chamber after talking with him some more. I felt ironclad in my conviction that I was not okay with my wife sleeping with some other guy, and that if she did, I would divorce her when I went home that night. I felt strong. Have your private parts ever been examined by a doctor of the other gender? I was about 24 and had spent the weekend at an island cottage with two beautiful women. One of them was my girlfriend at the time, and the other was my oldest female friend whose family owned the 300-acre island. About a 2-hour drive from Toronto. I'd known her and her family since birth. We spent Saturday naked on the dock on a granite beach and driving around in a fast boat, screaming, behaving egregiously and guzzling screwdrivers. Through the day and into the night. I awoke Sunday morning with a fearsome burning sensation down there. I went to the woods for a pee and beheld a menacing blister forming on the head of my unit. I'd given myself a terrible sunburn as the morning progressed, so did the pain. After breakfast, I went to the dock and beach with them to continue the debauchery. This time wearing a sock containing my entire undercarriage for the whole day, secured with duct tape at the top back home. On Monday, the blister had reached full capacity and burst. By Tuesday, a scab the size of a quarter was forming and was weeping and gluing itself to my underwear, and then ripping open when I moved the wrong way. By Wednesday, I made the doctor's appointment. By then, whenever it got stiff, the scab would have the rug stretched out from under it and bleed. As I was a horned dog. At that age, it was terrifying. At the doctor's office, the receptionist asks the nature of my complaint. I decline to declare. After a moment, I'm invited into an examination room by a nurse. Some 10 minutes later in walks Dr. Monkman, our family doctor, my whole life. He's a bony skittish type with an awkward perma smile and a too soft, unsettling voice. Never cared for the creep, not comfortable in his own skin, let alone around others. Following him in roll, 3 young doctors in training, all female, all quite lovely. I thought to myself, this can go one of 2 ways. You allow humiliation and shame to steal the moment, or you make the greatest possible joke you can admit by admitting you're a doofus and have made a grave error. After introducing the 3 females and explaining their purpose there, my doctor says, "What can we do for you today, Paul?" Well, I say, I have a nasty sunburn that's blistered open, and I'm afraid I may have done myself a permanent injury. They look at me wanting to know more. I drop my pants in boxers. There droops the nastiest looking member anyone in that room has seen. How on earth did you manage that? Ask the doc, his nervous smile tinged with an edge of dread. I tell them the females are all very professional and kind about things, but as I explain, they're trying not to laugh. I have a tendency when under immense pressure to rise to the occasion with humor. I can't recall what I said, but it was all pretty self-deprecating. Guilty as charged. Yes. What a moron type stuff. The group decision was to let it breathe. Don't do it again and no stiffness till it's healed over. I have a souvenir freckle reminding me of that weekend.
Sons of Reddit, what is the worst part about having a passed-around sister? So, I'm in high school and recently got my driver's license and I'm going to my dream college in California. I have a sister who is in the same grade as me, but she is honestly kind of unintelligent and a complete idiot. She has a 2.5 GPA and she failing a decent amount of classes. Earlier this week I found out that she won't be graduating, which is honestly a bit sad considering she is already behind in life. But one fateful day she comes home from school and tells our family that she's pregnant. While we were initially taken aback, we later learned that she was indeed right and that this would be a huge financial burden on the family. The question was, who was the baby's father? This is something we really needed to know. We get a DNA test and it shows that the baby's father was our high school principal. We are all like, there is no freaking way this is true, but my dad just is sitting there quietly and says, well, I mean, she does get around. It sounded like my dad that he knew more about this situation than we did. My sister wants to keep the baby. However, our family did not want to pay for it. I forgot to mention that my sister does OnlyFriends since she turned 18 and has been getting over $30,000 per month. We just came to the conclusion that she's going to be paying for the baby. Hopefully, the baby never gets made fun of in the future because of what his mom does. Dads of Reddit, how did you find out your daughter got with her principal? I can confidently say I love my son way more than my daughter because he is less problematic. He gets good grades, takes AP classes, and just got accepted into his dream college in California. Meanwhile, my daughter, who's the same age, is a complete idiot and she has a 2.5 GPA, multiple infractions on her record, and doesn't even have her freaking driver's license yet. Anyways, I knew she belonged to the streets because she had OnlyFriends, and you will not believe how I found out. One day I'm just having a regular conversation with my son and out of nowhere my daughter pulled up in a new 2022 BMW. I asked why her friend was letting her borrow her car, and that's when she replied with, "Dad, this is mine. You know I do OnlyFriends and I make enough to support myself." This came as a complete shock because back then she would always tell me she was going to work and she claimed to work at a restaurant. Anyways, I kept on getting calls from the school telling me my daughter would always leave class for extraordinarily long time periods. After finding out she did OnlyFriends, I had to make sure she wasn't doing anything inappropriate in the school bathrooms. So one day, while I dropped her off at school, I decided to chat with the principal. I had to know what was happening behind the scenes. I sit down and the principal said, "Sir, I regret to inform you that your daughter will not be graduating this semester. She has a D average and has just failed Algebra 2. I tear up a bit, but I get myself together. As we continue chatting, I look around the room and notice a rubber on the floor. At first I think nothing of it, but then I see a piece of my daughter's clothing on the shelf. I knew it was my daughter's shirt because I dropped her off in the morning and I remember her wearing that shirt. I immediately asked him, "Are you getting with my daughter?" And that's when the room filled with silence. He gave me a concerned look and asked why I would ask such an inappropriate question. He told me that piece of clothing was from a kid who got dress-coded. I just shrugged it off and apologized to him for asking such a question and headed my way back home. We're all just sitting in the living room, and that's when my daughter said she had important news to tell us. She told us she's actually going to be graduating this semester because the principal did a few things to help her not fail. Then, out of nowhere, she decided to tell us she was pregnant and she's keeping the baby. I was so stunned and shocked, but we had to figure out who the dad was, so we decided to get a DNA test, and you will not believe who the father was.
What's the most disgusting thing you'll admit to doing? I am a recovering opiate addict, as you can imagine. Some days I would get really desperate, particularly if I had been jonesing for a few days in a row. I live in a place that has a high rate of opiate addiction but seemingly very few actual dealers. So one time after a 3-day dry spell, I was texting everyone I knew, trying to find some H or Oxy, but everyone I knew was out of everything. Finally, in the early afternoon, an old buddy of mine hits me up out of the blue wanting to hang out. I wasn't feeling up to the task because I was busy crawling out of my skin and telling him as much. Well, he showed up at my house about an hour later, and at first I was thinking frick, that was until I opened the door. And the first thing that came through was his hand holding a bottle of 10 milligrams hydro. They weren't what I wanted. But goddammit. If I didn't start calling him Jesus because he saved me that day when you're in withdrawal, that bad. Some pretty stupid ideas of how to get high pop into your head. Now, when I was in withdrawal I just didn't eat. I didn't even think about food. I would go a few days at a time without eating. I was a pretty hefty guy at the time. So my sustained me, I guess. However, when my friend brought in the hydros, I knew I had to eat if I didn't and took too many hydros, the acetaminophen, and then would make me sick and I would probably throw up. I had a whole lasagna that my girlfriend had made the night before that neither of us had eaten in the fridge. So I decided to chow down. I ate half of it. Then I was ready to medicate. Actually, at this point and also with hydros, it was less, get high and more get back up to sea level. I was reckless and stupid back then. So I took 13 at once. No exaggeration, which honestly was only 3 more than I usually took when I did hydros. But it was still too much for even self whenever you do drugs that have acetaminophen in them. If you do too much, you get a metallic taste in your mouth. It usually takes a few minutes, but it happens. Well, I tasted it almost immediately. Then I realized the combination of not eating for 2.5 days, mixed with a ton of day-old cold lasagna on 13 by 325 milligrams of acetaminophen made me feel very sick. I ran to my front door. Then I threw up everywhere. Unfortunately, my original problem still persisted. I was in withdrawal and felt even worse now than before when we first split the hydros up. My buddy only wanted 3. And so he gave me the other 13, his tolerance was low and he didn't mind, so he took his 3 and I took my 13. I took them all. I had none left. I had no choice. I dug through the vomit attempting to find little yellow pills that said Watson on the side. One after another, I found them and downed all 13 each with a swig of Coke. I found 11. Then I found 2 more in my peat that were actually in good enough condition so I could tell what they were. I'm not sure what the 2 things I swallowed were. It was hard to tell and even harder to find all those pills in the middle of the grass.
Woman of Reddit, do your boyfriends ever eat their own leftovers after the deed? F23, I've been in a relationship with this guy, M33, for like a year. When we started dating, after a month of getting to know each other we went to his place and did the deed. Enjoyable experience overall. But, after he was done, he removed the condom and, with very expert gestures, proceeded to drink his junk right out of it. I was shocked and confused. In my head I was like, yo, man, WTF? He was my first partner and like, I wondered if that was, kinda normal. Common? Ick. Since I used to be a people pleaser, I managed to hide my shock and disgust, and simply asked him, why did you do that? He answered me, as if it was the most obvious thing in the world, it's a lot of kilojoules of energy, I can't waste them. I was even more confused. I was literally speechless and what was being a very nice and romantical night managed to become a weird and kinda awkward situation. To make things worse, he even stated in a very dramatic tone, "I will never allow anyone to eat my semen." He said that like his junk was something precious, like, if someone would ever get access to that, it was like, being able to steal his soul. It made no sense. And also, dude, nobody here is trying to steal your precious cum. Ugh. By the way, he wasn't drinking his cum in a kinky or erotic way or ick, he did it like it was an extremely serious and important deal. Why drinking your own cum must be so dramatic? We kept dating for several months and every time we had sex, every single time, he did the same thing. I started to become very concerned, since usually inside the condoms there's usually some lube, I guess? He even complained about the bad taste of the lube or the latex the condom was made of. The taste of his own cum somehow didn't bother him at all, good for him. And even if usually lube is not that toxic, I think that consuming a small amount but very often may not be the healthiest habit. Also his breath right after this ritual almost made me throw up all the times, since he even refused to brush his teeth afterwards. I didn't chew, I swallowed it in one gulp, so I don't need to brush my teeth. Ew. I tried to discreetly make him understand that his habit was grossing me out, by saying out loud, "Ew," or by covering my eyes, but he didn't got the clues. A year passed by. I had enough. I tried to confront him, but nope. He was unmovable. Neither the fact that his passion for his own cum was making me a little uncomfortable, nor the fact that eating lube could be harmful made him stop. He then proceeded to get mad. He stated that he wasn't doing anything wrong, that he just didn't want to waste precious substances from his body, and that I was making a scene for nothing. I told him about his breath and he straight up accused me of having a bad smell. I told him that by deflecting my accuse he was just making things worse, but then he interrupted me and just told me I was insufferable. Then he just left. He was extremely angry, I've never seen that side of him. I'm sure that he will tell me to pack my things and to leave. So right now I'm mad, confused and scared about his behavior. I unintentionally cheated on my husband with my husband. I'm a 30-year-old woman and have been married to my 36-year-old husband for 12 years and we've been together for 16 years through the ups and downs of life. We've had an amazing relationship in every aspect. We even have 4 kids. It all happened on Reddit a few months ago. I was scrolling and came across a post about one of my favorite songs and enthusiastically commented. Someone then replied with a super witty response. And shortly after me, I accepted the invite and we started chatting. I learned that the person was a male in his mid-30s, lived in my area, and we shared many interests, passions, and outlooks. Both of us chose to remain anonymous as the internet is a scary place. But after a few days of frequent chatting, I realized I'm really attracted to this guy without even knowing what he looks like. He was funny, smart, passionate, loved his kids and pets, and overall really charming. We never had any suggestive chats or anything, but I panicked, feeling guilty, confused and scared. Nothing like this had ever happened to me before. I love my husband passionately all the years we've been together and couldn't imagine being with anyone else. The fact that I had a wet dream about this guy on Reddit shook me and I decided to take action and tell my husband what's going on. We've always believed in openness and honesty as pillars of a marriage. Later that day, I received a message from the guy on Reddit. "You're an amazing person, kind, loving, passionate, heartwarming. I'm extremely attracted to you. But I am married to a woman who is the light and essence of my life. I'm sorry, but I can't chat to you anymore." I was relieved but a little hurt even though I understood completely. So I went to my husband that evening before I can say anything. He hands me his phone and tells me he has something to share with me. He instructs me to read the messages on the screen while he tells me that he realized he is undeniably attracted to the internet stranger. But that I'm the only one he loves and that he just needed to be open with me. I take out my phone, open my chat with the Reddit guy and hand it to my husband. He scrolls through it in confusion before realizing I'm the woman he has been chatting to this entire time and he is the Reddit guy whom I found so attractive.
Men of Reddit, how did you have intercourse with a flight attendant on a plane? So I'm currently 28 and work remotely in cybersecurity, so I always have a lot of free time. My buddy, whom I've known since I was 14, invited me to his wedding that was going to be in Germany. I gladly accepted because he's been one of my best friends since childhood and I've always wanted to travel to different countries in Europe. Little did I know I would be joining the Mile High Club in the most unexpected way. Anyways, I arrive at the airport and everything went pretty smoothly except for the airport security who makes scan all your items. Anyone who has been through airport security knows they yell at you and rush you to dump all your belongings in the box. But I'm waiting in line to check onto the plane and I noticed the beautiful flight crew boarding the plane. I was flying Emirates and anyone who has flown Emirates knows the woman flight attendants are 10 out of 10s. I even found some of the men attractive and I'm straight. I noticed one of the flight attendants looking at me and she waved at me and I low-key kinda blushed, I'm not going to lie. Everything went pretty well. We boarded the planes and I found my seat in first class and made myself comfortable. The flight attendants started going around handing out food and drinks, and that's when I noticed the woman flight attendant who waved at me coming with the cart. She asked me what I wanted and I asked if she was on the menu and she let out a little chuckle and I could see her blushing. Anyways, I told her I wanted a sandwich and we started to have a pretty good conversation. I immediately felt the connection between us and noticed she kept on checking in on me more than the other flyers. Our flight was 11 hours and it was around 11 p.m. and that's when everyone started to fall asleep. I started to doze and that's when I felt a tapping on my shoulder and I looked up and saw it was the beautiful flight attendant I've been having chemistry with. She asked if I was getting a little sleepy and replied with a half-sleepy yeah, and that's when she proceeded to ask me if she could join me in my nap. I was a little confused and thought she was joking, but she literally got in the bed with me and that's when she started to.
Doctors of Reddit, have you accidentally complimented a patient's junk? This happened yesterday and I'm still horrified and laughing about it. I'm an ultrasound technician. I had a patient come in for an ultrasound because he had some swelling in one of his balls. The normal procedure is I leave the room. He takes off his pants and underwear and lays on the exam table and covers up with a sheet. So we do the normal procedure and I come back in the room to place a towel over his groin while pulling down the sheet. He remains covered. I place another towel over his legs below the balls. This keeps only the balls exposed during the procedure. Everything is good. So far the scan involves checking each ball as well as the surrounding area. For the most part, this is just place the ultrasound, get image, repeat as I'm working. I can see he is slightly uncomfortable and keeps moving. It's not uncommon for men to get up right down there if you know what I mean. Typically I ignore it, but this guy is shifting enough that I'm not able to get images. I say don't worry about it. It's normal, but I need you to hold still. He settles down and I continue. The towel is bulging enough that I can tell he is still stiff. I need images of the urethra. So I am checking his shaft also. Yep. It's still hard bit of context. This guy is hot. I have an attractive man laying on the table with no pants in his stiff junk covered by nothing more than a bulging towel while my hand is rubbing a wand along the length of his shaft. No big deal. I'm a professional. I finish and start to put the machine away. But between his moving and my nervousness, I don't realize that the cord is under the edge of the towel. The towel starts to slide off as I pull. So I reach down to stop it. I'm reaching between the bed and the ultrasound machine and lose my balance. I have a hold of the towel as I start to fall and rip it off. A blob of what I hope is lubricant from the ultrasound catapults up and hits me in the face as I'm bent over, not thinking. I use the towel that is already in my hand to wipe myself off as I'm wiping my face on this guy's loincloth. I get a good view of him. After a moment, I realize that I'm just staring at his extremely large and very stiff junk. He is completely exposed but afraid to cover himself because I already got onto him from moving earlier. I start to apologize. I meant to say something along the lines of, "Oh my God. I'm so sorry." Instead what comes out is, "Wow. Impressive. I mentioned I'm a professional." Right. I lay the towel back over him, fumble to put the machine away and tell him to get dressed and open the door when he is done. He tried to tell me it's no big deal when he was leaving. But I was so embarrassed that I couldn't even make eye contact. When did you realize that your child wasn't who you thought they were? When he disappeared. I knew that adopting an older child meant that their personality preferences and essentially self would already be fundamentally formed. I was warned that I could likely change very little of the child's personality. If I adopted anyone over 7 years old, the boy, I finally decided to make. My son was 12 at the time of adoption and had been fostered out at least a dozen times, returned because he was unmanageable and aloof. I was determined to prove them wrong and I did. He was incredibly reticent, but he was also very sweet and compassionate. I figured out that his silence was a combination of traumatic mutism and shyness therapy for the trauma and drawing out for the shyness. I sent him to school with children his age when I felt he was confident enough to cope. I talked to him constantly, which he seemed to like. When he was 16, he disappeared. Suddenly a note saying I'm with friends, I'm safe. I'll be back was all I got. All of a sudden, his sweetness turned bitter. He did come back and it was as if he was a different person entirely. I was dumbstruck. Who was this tall, young man who rolled his shoulders back instead of slumping them forward, who raked his hair back, making his eyes glow bright instead of letting the bangs fall in his face and dim, the color, who chatted away to his best friend RJ, like the most talkative of his peers. One day RJ came over, but this was unlike any other visit in that when he departed, my son gave him a kiss that was very not platonic. I thought I had him figured out, like those foster parents who sent him back. I was wrong. He wasn't sweet anymore but kind. He wasn't silent, but he wasn't loud either. Having trouble with public speaking to this day. As I saw when he joined some of his friends for Pride for the first time, he had a tiger's core of steel that let him endure and thrive. I thought him fragile and in need of protection. I needn't have thought that it was there for anyone to see that somehow he'd survive those 5 years without falling into depression or social anxiety disorder. Aside from traumatic mutism, he had few problems. He was much more than I'd known. Men of Reddit, have you ever cheated with your coworker and moved away with them? I work in international live events that take weeks to pull off. I typically coordinate them, and work with a team to install and operate. I'm close with my coworkers, but we live across the world and fly into every event. I've met most of my coworkers in person, but this event we had someone new working sound, Clint. I'd seen him in Zoom calls but we hadn't interfaced directly. This event was a big one for the company, big headliner and big partners with a lot of money being tossed around. I arrived at the install, got caught up to speed, met Clint, and got to work. One by one, my coworkers were sent off to other events. Clint and I were left to finish everything up, but bad weather and huge letdowns by one of our vendors had us in hot water. We started working 15 to 20-hour days to get everything done on time. After our long haul days, Clint and I would hang out and blaze, legally. We had a lot in common, and were vibing like neither of us felt before. We were both married, unhappily. His wife had a bunch of medical problems and was really good at spending money and never leaving school. My husband had turned into an angry person, had built up a pile of debt, and was not putting anything into the relationship. It started out platonic, but things got extremely stressful and our sexual tension started building up. The lack of sleep, stress, and my lower tolerance for cannabis left me questioning everything about my life. We both felt like the other person was an extension of ourselves, we were kindred spirits. Slowly, Clint started making moves and suddenly dinners were turning into dates, and we were hanging out in each other's hotel rooms. We crossed many lines, but right as we crossed the final line, my brain kicked back in and we decided to take care of our lives before going further. Over the last few days of the event, Clint and I continued to be close. We made plans to leave our spouses, sell our houses, and travel together. We created a bucket list of places to go, things to do and see together. We even talked about eventually building a little cabin. Clint had planned on getting a tattoo dedicated to me when he returned home. At the end of the event, we went our separate ways and kept in touch virtually. Lots of sexting and unprofessionalism all around. We had agreed we wouldn't tell our partners about the affair as they each have mental health issues, but we planned to divorce and move on with our lives. After a few days at home, I talked with my husband and asked for divorce. I told him I wanted to move away and start my life over. Clint talked to his wife, but things were messier. She was volatile, and her family made it difficult for Clint to outright leave her. Eventually I noticed Clint was becoming distant. Still sexual, but not as emotionally available. He sent me pictures of his new tattoos, which were nothing like what he had said he was planning to me. Alarm bells were going off in my head, but I kept plodding along, planning mine and our escape. Clint went off to a series of anniversary-related dates with his wife, and kept leaving me on read. I asked him what was going on a number of times. Finally, after weeks of mixed signals, Clint told me he was having doubts. We video chatted during work, and he told me he owed it to his wife to try and make things work. Now I'm left to pick up the pieces of my life. Most of my friends are my coworkers, so I have no one to talk to about my heartbreak. I don't have the money to fix my problems at home or to leave and live alone in another country. There's no going back with my husband as I know it would be wrong, and I'm no longer interested in carrying the relationship. I'll see Clint again in a few weeks at another event, where we'll likely be left alone for hours at a time, but he plans to stay faithful to his wife, and we never even got to have the mind-blowing sex we talked about.
Men of Reddit, how did you end up having intercourse with one of your friend's mom? I was in a fraternity in college and ended up sleeping with a mom of one of my fraternity brothers. One night I matched with a woman on Tinder who seemed intriguing. We chatted and she revealed that she was older, a mom, and wanted to have some fun away from her responsibilities. I was curious and found it amusing, so we decided to meet at a nearby bar. After a few hours, she invited me to her place and my adventurous side took over the thought of experiencing something forbidden. Thrilled me. But little did I know that this would take an unforeseen twist as we reached her home. She hesitated and her expression shifted to something I couldn't decipher. That's when it hit me. She was my friend's mom, the very same friend who invited me into the fraternity. I was stunned and speechless, and the hilarity of the situation made it even harder not to burst out laughing, so I just went with the flow and absolutely raw-dogged her and made sure she knew who was boss. Things got very steamy and we eventually finished up. I felt guilty, so I told her I was in a fraternity. She asked me which fraternity, and that's when I responded with the same fraternity her son was in at the same school. Her jaw dropped and I asked her what was wrong. She told me her son went to the same college and was in the same frat and how we couldn't tell him about this experience. Overall, the experience was a solid 9 out of 10 and I highly doubt I'll tell my frat bro I slept with his mom.
Men of Reddit, how did you lose your V card to your principal at school? So I'm currently a senior in high school and school's about to finish in around a month. I've always been a troubled kid and I'm a regular in the principal's office and in school suspicion. My principal was pretty chill and she wouldn't give me any harsh punishments and we actually got along pretty well. To describe my principal, she's a 5'3" blonde who's pretty curvy and she has a nice pair on her, I'm not going to lie. But anyways, I got sent to the principal's office yesterday because apparently I was interrupting class and distracting others. Little did I know this would be the best visit I've had going to the principal office. As I said before, me and my principal are pretty chill with each other and we get along, But at the end of the day she still has to do her job and give me my consequences. I sit down and my principal gives me a smirk telling me I'm a regular here and we have to come up with a solution to stop making me come here. That's when she got up out of her chair and walked around her desk to me and told me she knows a way she can stop me from coming here and that I couldn't tell anyone what was about to happen. Out of nowhere she started to unzip my pants and things got pretty steamy and one thing led to another and she was on top of me. She made sure to put a do not disturb sign on her door so nobody would walk in on us. It was my first time ever doing it, but I didn't tell her that I still had my V card, so I just pretended like I knew what I was doing. I'm pretty surprised with myself because I lasted around 2 minutes, but those 2 minutes were the best minutes of my life. She told me I would have to behave now, and you know I'm going to be behaving from now on. I decided to go to a glory hole today and now I'm crying. Hi, my name is Nick, and I am an 18-year-old boy who has never had a girlfriend, or even kissed a girl. I wouldn't say I'm the most unattractive person ever, but I know girls have liked me before. It was my fault to not act on it. I am an honors student, who has never done drugs, or drink alcohol, which, writing that now is making me feel even more regret. Recently I've been feeling lonelier than ever. With graduation coming up and not having any relationship at all, I felt a sense of panic. I felt like I had to do something. Please note that I do watch a lot of porn, and talk to strangers all the time, so this didn't seem that new to me. I saw an ad for a glory hole on the way back from spring vacation. I knew what they were, so I wasn't blindsided in any way, so I texted the number and sure enough, got a response. We exchanged information, and he said I had the good to go, so I went to his house and he was waiting there, with a sheet covering the wall, only for a small hole to be seen. On the way there I lost twice, and kept feeling more and more nervous the closer I got, but in my head I just kept saying you're an adult now, you can do this, it's what you want. Once I put it in, heard the noise and felt what I was feeling, I immediately regretted it, but it was too late, I couldn't just leave, so I stayed until I finished. I left the house with an open gap in my mouth. It wasn't that it didn't feel good, but rather that I feel like I've sunk to a level I didn't know was possible. I am now crying in my car, knowing my life and history with myself will never be the same. I was desperate. I was more than desperate for something I thought I needed, and now I lost a part of me I'll never get back. I don't mean to sound this edgy, but I made an entire separate account to write this out. Thank you for listening. I witnessed my sister lose her V card to my hockey teammate. Not sure if this belongs here, but I don't know where else to share it. I played hockey at a pretty high level. Almost every weekend during the season, we were traveling all over the US and Canada for games and staying in hotels. Occasionally my dad, mom, and younger sister would make the trip as well to come watch. They would get a separate room because us players would be sharing rooms already. At nights, there would usually be a group of us that would gather in one room to watch a movie and just hang out before going to sleep. On this trip, my family came to watch, and that night my sister was hanging out with me and some of my teammates because it's not as boring as having to spend the weekend with my parents. Eventually, everyone started going back to their rooms to go to sleep, and I told my sister she could stay in my room that I was sharing with a teammate. My sister and I in one bed and my roommate in the other one. I fell asleep pretty fast, and at some point in the middle of the night, I woke up because I heard whispering and someone moving around. I looked over at the other bed and saw my sister in the other bed with my teammate on top of her. The blanket was mostly covering them, but from the movement it was very clear that he was fucking her. Her knees were up and I could see his hips rising and falling between her legs. They were obviously trying to be quiet, but I heard light moaning and saw them kissing. When they were done, he got off her and laid back down and they made out for a minute or two. Then I saw her grab her panties and put them back on under the blanket. My sister started to get out of his bed, so I had to close my eyes to keep pretending to be asleep. I felt her get back into my bed and fall asleep. I didn't get much sleep after that. Just laid there pretending to sleep. The next morning, nothing was said about what happened and I'm sure they both still assume I slept through it all. I never told or said anything about it to anyone.
I caught one of my husband's friends pleasuring himself to my panties. We had a barbecue not too long ago at our house. Medium-sized crowd, so not too many people. I was running around trying to make sure everyone had what they wanted. I ducked back inside to grab some more items. On my way to the kitchen, I pass our downstairs bathroom, which also has our washer and dryer in it. Door was shut and I peeked inside to make sure it was somewhat clean just in case someone needed to use it. The door was unlocked and right as I looked inside I surprisingly saw someone was in there. I tried to quietly leave, then noticed he wasn't near the toilet but was standing next to our clothes hamper with his back to me. It was one of my husband's friends. I don't know him that well, but he seems okay. I was embarrassed for walking in and wanted to leave, but then I realized there was a jerking movement coming from him. I watched for a second and it was obvious what he was doing. I cleared my throat loudly and he turned around surprised. There, wrapped around his D, was a pair of my panties. He immediately started apologizing, which was better than him saying, "This is not what it looks like, because dude, you have my thong around your dick, of course it is what it looks like," and telling me not to tell my husband. I just stood there. He quickly unwrapped my thong from his D and moves to put it back into the hamper. I said that's not going in there. It's yours now. You just bought yourself a thong. Lock the door, finish what you need to finish and then leave however much you think you owe for that pair of panties on the kitchen counter and shut the door. I felt really proud as I normally am not that quick. I didn't see him the rest of the barbecue. Afterwards, as I am cleaning up, I find $2.20s, a $5 and $3 1s on the kitchen counter.
Ha!
I think he just gave me whatever he had in his wallet, $48, and then bolted. Still haven't told me husband, but I thought it was pretty funny.
My coworker caught me at the self-pleasuring toy shop today. My wife and I live about 30 minutes outside of a fairly large city. Today, we wanted to have a nice day out in that city, mostly by eating out and visiting a museum and a bookstore we love, but we had some fun exploring that area of town too. There was a sex shop in the area that the bookstore and museum are in, and my wife and I thought it would be fun to go in and buy something. While we've certainly bought things for ourselves online, we'd never gone to an actual physical retail location for a sex shop, so we were a bit excited and thought it would be fun to at least peruse the aisles and see what they were like. For the most part, we were just laughing and joking around about some of the items. To be completely honest, I highly suspect that some of the larger dildos exist for intimidation more so than actual recreational use, but we also ended up picking out some things for ourselves. Now, the side of the store facing the street was entirely, not tinted, glass. After we bought our item, my wife and I went to look at some of the outfits at the front of the store before leaving. We had a bit of fun looking through the outfits, then left the store. We weren't really paying attention to anyone outside. Unfortunately, immediately upon leaving the store, we ran into my coworker. I work remotely, but we have Zoom meetings on Mondays, and he has certainly seen me many times. He looked at the shop, then looked at me, said bet you'll be in a good mood tomorrow, then continued walking. Men of Reddit, has there ever been a time where you were scrolling on the hub and found a video that you were starring in? About a year ago I, 24M, had a FWB fling with a girl, 25F, that I'll call Jane for the sake of this post. During this fling we filmed a lot of videos in bed together. Some videos on her phone, and some on mine, then we'd send them to each other. It was just a bit of fun between us and was supposed to stay between us. Fast forward a year later to the present, I haven't spoken to Jane since then. I've seen her at the local bar every now and again and we've noticed each other, but never took the time to actually step away from our friends and say hello to each other. She's changed quite a bit in that year personality-wise in my opinion. She's more promiscuous, drinks more, stuff like that. She used to be a classic quiet, girl next door type. Other than that we're cordial and had no problems between us. 2 months ago in the beginning of June she made an OF account and began selling explicit pictures and videos of herself. It became common knowledge around my city and age group as she would promote herself on social media. I never thought much of it and never subscribed to her because A, I don't want to, and B, I don't have an OF account to even subscribe to her with. But I do know a few people that did subscribe. Well, I didn't think much of it until yesterday, and this is where the F up begins. Jane and I have a mutual friend I'll call H, 24F. H texted me yesterday saying she had to tell me something. H tells me that Jane has been selling our SX tapes on OF for 2 weeks. Not just one video but 4 of them. H admits that Jane showed her the videos and you can see a couple of my identifying arm tattoos that a lot of people know I have. H and a couple other of Jane's girlfriends were all under the impression that I was okay with the videos being sold. Until Jane let it slip a few days ago that since the fling ended last year, we haven't really spoke. H and a couple other girls decided to tell me after that, and that H said she would be the one to tell me since she's closer friends with me than I am with the rest of the girls. H also added that Jane has sold each video at least once and probably multiple times as far as she knows. I didn't even know what to say. I FaceTimed H and asked her to explain it all again. She explained it again, then offered to help me confront Jane about it. I asked if she knew who they've been sold to and she's not entirely sure since a lot of Jane's subscribers have anonymous names on their OF accounts. Now I'm stuck wondering who has the videos, who knows about the videos, and if anyone is sending them around or posting them on other websites. I felt like laughing and crying at the same time. Now I'm just thinking about how to take care of this. H agreed to help me confront Jane this weekend. She assured me that she's on my side as well as the other couple girls that know I didn't consent to having the videos sold. I'm afraid the narrative is already out of my control though. People could think the videos are recent. I've been talking to a girl I like and really don't want her to find out. I don't want my friends to find out, and I definitely don't want my family to find out. I effed up and made SX tapes with the wrong girl. A year ago I never thought she'd be the type to show people, let alone sell the damn things. FML, today my girlfriend suggested a threesome with her best friend. So recently girlfriend went to the Beyoncé concert. Unfortunately she pre-gamed a little too hard and ended up missing the show because she was too hungover. I took her home early that night. While she was out drinking with her friends pre-gaming, she texted me out the blue saying her best friend, single, wanted to have a threesome with us. For context, her best friend was one of her college roommates and teammates. She is the one friend she trusts the most in her life. I immediately responded with disbelief, as I thought it was a shit test. My girlfriend and I don't like to share and can be very jealous/protective of attention from others. We've talked about a threesome before, only one in which the focus would be more so between her and the girl while I watch/participate with my GF only. It was a casual conversation at the time, nothing was planned/set in stone. My girlfriend responded that it was an option, and that her best friend would only be into kissing her though. She previously revealed to me she experimented with a girl, so I had asked her if that was her best friend she experimented with, but the answer was unclear. She was drunk. Later that night I had asked her best friend if that was true and she said she never brought it up that particular night and that if my GF said it, it was definitely her idea. Oddly enough, in the morning I told my GF, sober, what she said last night and she confirmed it was an option but didn't really continue the conversation. Her best friend did approach the conversation later that morning again, jokingly saying that they both talked about one having during their college days and that my GF originally came up with the idea. I can't tell if they're being serious or this is a massive shit test, but it does have me curious.
Men of Reddit who had a relationship with their doctor, how'd it go? I'm currently 32 and I've been going to the doctor more than usual because my doctor is gorgeous. To give you guys an idea of what she looks like, she's a 5'3" brunette and she's Latina. She has a pretty nice dump truck and a good pair on her, I'm not going to lie. Anyways, my old doctor who was 68 recently retired a few months ago and my new doctor was this fine Latina woman. I was pretty surprised when I first came into my checkup a few months ago and I was informed of the news. The first time I came in for my checkup, I felt an instant connection with my new doctor and she informed me that she was freshly single and coming out of a divorce. I took this as a green flag because no woman would just openly say they are single for no reason. After my first checkup, I kept on making random excuses to get more checkups just to see my doctor. I honestly felt a connection with her, and every checkup I came into, I felt as she was flirting with me, and she eventually gave me her number and we started talking outside of my appointments. Everything went pretty well. But one day I scheduled a checkup appointment and everything was going pretty well, and it came to the part where she had to check my junk. You already know the part where she had to check my private was the best part and the main reason I even came there, but I noticed she had her hand on my junk for a lot longer than usual, and that's when she started to... Fathers of Reddit, why did you put your teen daughter up for adoption? I am a 30-year-old father and had my daughter when I was around 15, which was far too early for most people growing up. I came from a wealthy family who inherited a $20 million house from my grandparents. However, during a period of rough economic turmoil, my family lost almost everything in their savings and I moved out and got a girl pregnant. At that time, my girlfriend kept a baby, but she broke up with me shortly after anyways. 15 years later, I live on a ranch with my daughter who is turning 19 next month. I love her. However, she is easy to get with and is completely passed around. I guess my father's influence on her is weak and therefore she is just unchangeable. One day this would change when she got with someone and didn't ask permission to have intercourse. And it was a whole legal case. The family would then end up demanding $2 million in legal damages, which our family did not have. I had to sell my investments. But even that was not enough. I decided I had to do what any father would do in this scenario. I considered adoption. However, I decided not to follow through with it because I love my daughter more than anything in the world.
Today I messed up. My parents found my foreskin in my room. I am a circumcised at birth male who has been thinking about what it would be like to have my original foreskin. I looked online and found subs related to regenerating the foreskin, but I am not set on trying that for years to find out how I look. So I looked at some other stuff and came across a fake foreskin thing from Oxballs that just slides on and you enjoy. Not the best looking thing, but it was not bad and I was purchasing it from Etsy and they said discreet shipping. A very important detail since I still live with my parents who are very conservative. I debated it for weeks before biting the bullet and going for it. Shipping was quick and it arrived today. I came home to find the package missing from the mail. I walk into my bedroom to find the foreskin sitting in its packaging on my bed. No discreet wrapping or anything. See-through plastic so there is no hiding it. Soul leaves body. I have no clue if they knew what it was, but I'm like dead inside and not in the haha funny way. They went to the store and that's where they are now and I have no clue what they are going to say. Update, so my mom asked what it was and I don't think my father knows about it, but she didn't know what to make of it as far as I know. She might be just asking to see if I fess up. I told her it's a gag gift and she would probably not like it. She has not mentioned it since, so I might be clear. Redditors, what is the most terrible thing you've ever witnessed? Many years ago I was driving home for Christmas and I got stuck on a major highway behind a horrific accident. Eventually they opened up a single lane and as cars came to pass through the accident scene they had lined up 5 to 6 deceased people on the shoulder of the highway in the snow. An entire family was wiped out and visible to all who were still moving. Even now, decades later, it still makes me sick to my stomach just thinking about it. This was maybe 2 days before Christmas. I work as a toll collector. I see some crazy shit. And it's made me want to drive even less. These people are insane. They will drive all the way up to closed lanes that not only have red light but cones out before they realize it's closed. So many accidents almost happen. People come up on the curb all the time. They almost hit the concrete barriers a lot. They almost rear-end the person in front of them because they have to be right up their ass the whole time. One time a coworker had a customer asking about turning around. She told them point blank, you cannot do that. You have to go to the next exit, get off and get back on the other direction. And they ignored her. Tried to do a U-turn and was hit by a semi-truck. No one in the car survived. It was such a pointless waste of life, and from what I heard kinda fucked up the truck driver, since there wasn't anything he could have done but had to live with that guilt anyways. My wife's best friend answered the door only in her underwear. The other day, 35 male, had an odd encounter that I can't seem to shake from my mind. It involved my wife's close friend, 37 female, the mother of one of our child's friends. We've always maintained a cordial relationship with them, having attended several gatherings at each other's homes, and we've known each other for quite some time. However, the incident that occurred at their house was not one I expected. My son had accidentally left an item at their house, and being the closest, I was the one to retrieve it. It was a casual day. Nothing special. So I anticipated nothing more than a brief exchange and a return trip home. When I reached their home and knocked on the door, I was greeted by a sight that left me taken aback. The door was answered by my wife's friend, dressed only in her underwear and an open button-down shirt. It was a startling image. Certainly not something I was prepared for. Nor had I ever seen her in such a state before. Despite my visible surprise, she didn't seem flustered in the slightest. She ushered me inside without a second thought, not even bothering to adjust her button shirt. It was as if my presence was of no consequence to her current state of undress. She then proceeded to retrieve the forgotten item from a desk rather than simply bending her knees or lowering herself slightly. She chose to bend over in a way that made her open shirt rise, revealing her bottom. It struck me as odd and unnecessary. Given the item was on the desk, not on the floor. After handing me the item, she casually struck up a conversation about our plans for the day, seemingly attempting to prolong the interaction. I responded with politeness but made it a point to keep responses brief, eager to end the awkward encounter. The whole episode left me puzzled. Was the interaction intentional on her part? When I mentioned it to my wife, she dismissed it, saying she probably thought I was going to pick it up. Don't flatter yourself yet. I can't help but feel that her friend's lack of alarm at my presence during her state of undress was unusual. I got the impression that her actions were deliberate, and her attempt to keep me there longer only added to my discomfort as I continue to ponder over the incident. I can't help but think about, what if the roles were reversed? What if it had been her husband in a similar state of undress with my wife as the unsuspecting visitor? I sincerely doubt I would have been comfortable with such a situation. The whole ordeal has left me with more questions than answers and a lingering sense of unease.
College students of Reddit, how did you end up getting with your tutor? So I'm currently a freshman in college majoring in art at a pretty big university. For some reason I have to take a math class so I can graduate, so I just decided to get it out of the way pretty fast. Little did I know this would be the hardest math class that I would have ever taken in my life. I was barely passing the class, and I asked my professor what could be some options to help me not fail his class. He recommended me to get a tutor in the math department because they were students who passed the class with a pretty good grade. I was assigned to this one tutor who was a 5'5" blonde who was a junior, and she was pretty attractive if I say so myself. Anyways, I knew the main reason why I got her was so that I could pass my math class, so I knew the chances of me getting with her were slim to none, even though I think I'm a pretty attractive guy. I had a tutoring session every Tuesday and Thursday at 6 p.m. every week. The sessions were going amazing, and I felt me and my tutor had a pretty good connection. I even felt like she was slightly flirting with me some days from the way she spoke to me. As I said before, I needed help in tutoring, so all my tutoring sessions were hosted in the School of Math building. But today the school math building was closed for renovations for a few days. I called my tutor and asked her if we were still going to have our tutoring session, and she assured it was still on and we just needed to relocate. I asked her if we could just have our session in the library, and that's when she asked me if we could just do it in my dorm room to have a little bit of a more quiet area. I honestly didn't think anything of it and just told her that I was totally down for that. I invited her over and I knew something was immediately off. She didn't bring any of the supplies she usually brought to our sessions. I asked her why she didn't bring any of her supplies, and she replied with, "It's fine, we can just use your supplies instead." It was around 10 minutes into our session, and I noticed she was barely helping me and sidetracking the conversation to nothing that had to do with tutoring. Out of nowhere, she told me her back was hurting and if I could give her a massage. I was totally caught off guard because that question came out of the blue, and I just nervously said yes. She walked over to my bed and took off her top without even asking and laid there waiting for me to start the massage. I knew this would be an amazing opportunity to make a move, and that's when she said we should. Part 2. College students of Reddit, how did you end up getting with your tutor? She walked over to my bed and removed her top without even asking, and she revealed a decent amount. She laid on my bed with her back pointing up to me, and she told me just to give her a quick massage. I took it as a green flag and just decided to make a move on my tutor. I started to give her a massage and told me I was doing a pretty good job and kept on telling me to go lower down her back. I could hear her letting out little moans and her breathing getting heavier and heavier when I started going lower and lower down her back. That's when she told me she knows I like her, and I could feel my face getting red. I honestly didn't say anything, and that's when she let out a little laugh and flipped over to look at me and removed her top and told me to just get on top of her. I was flabbergasted because I thought this was a dream or something. I had to pinch myself to make sure this interaction was actually real. Her request were to get on top of her, so I gladly fulfilled her request and we began to have intercourse. It was 6 inches deep inside of her and we were around 5 minutes in, and that's when I heard the door to my dorm started to open. I quickly looked up and saw my roommate coming in. He immediately closed the door because he most likely knew what we were doing. We both got dressed and my tutor told me we shouldn't have done this and I couldn't tell anyone about this interaction. I told my roommate he could come in and my tutor quickly left after my roommate came in. My roommate told me I should have texted him that he had a girl over so he wouldn't disturb my session. I'm low-key kinda pissed because my tutor hasn't made a move on me and I never got to do my money shot on her.
What's the most shocking thing someone has done on a date with you? I met a guy on Tinder who seemed nice and fairly attractive at first. My first impression was that he seemed a little vanilla. He didn't drink or smoke and wanted to be a meteorologist. He was super close with his grandfather, gentlemanly and family-oriented, all green flags so far. We ended up going to Starbucks and talked for a couple hours. It was nice. So I set up another date. We went for ice cream this time and again, talked for a while. We were sitting outside talking about physical attractions. I mentioned how men are attracted to prominent parts in women, while girls tend to gravitate towards odd features like caps and such. All of a sudden he gets really weird and says, "I don't know if I should tell you this." So of course I prod him until he tells me. This ends up being my tragic mistake. First, he confesses to having a foot fetish, whatever. That's not super strange. Then he asked if I have ever heard of a crush fetish. He tells me not to Google it because it'll freak me out. There are 2 levels of a crush fetish level. One involves becoming aroused, watching someone crush invertebrate animals under their feet like bugs. Level 2 involves watching someone crush vertebrate animals like bunnies or kittens. WTF, excuse me, instantly. Something he'd said on our previous date popped into my head. We had a conversation on the first date about how I had been getting a lot more bugs in my room that summer, and so I'd been squishing bugs all day. I brought up this conversation from the last date, and he confessed that it really got him going. Trying not to throw up. I smiled and continued on. What kind of shoes do you typically wear? Oh, well, right now I have my moccasins on. Do you mind if I smell them? I'd love nothing more than to smell some sweaty moccasins. That was it. At that point, I was starting to plan my escape in my head when I felt something touch my ankle. I hadn't noticed that today. He came to our date with sandals. Well, now they were off and he was playing footsies with me and trying to get his big toe into my sock. Now, I'm not sure if this was his attempt at seducing me, but I got up and walked straight out the door. Over the next few months, he texted me 4 or 5 times asking me for my help and that he'd pay me to let him do stuff with my feet. I haven't blocked the number just in case I ever find myself in need of some quick cash. What is the creepiest thing that happened to you in your own home? I currently live with my parents. My dad has been working with a contractor and some of his employees to replace the wall-mounted air conditioners. There have been a lot of people in and out of the house. The day this happened, my mom and I went out to do some grocery shopping and my dad stayed home to direct the contractors. We got back and discovered they were gone, and my dad had gone to bed. So my mom and I made some dinner and hung out upstairs for a little while. I mentioned offhandedly to my mom that our cars were still outside, and I talked about a woman whose car and house had been broken into down the road. This creeped her out, and she sent me downstairs to check that the front door was locked. It wasn't, in fact, it was a little bit Asia. I closed it and locked the deadbolt. Then went back upstairs. We stayed upstairs and watched TV for a few more minutes until I heard a loud thump downstairs in the in-law apartment. I assumed that this was my cat getting antsy because I wasn't feeding her. I told my mom that I was going to go downstairs to feed her and then come up to finish the episode. As I walked down the stairs, I heard another louder thump, which I thought was my cat getting excited. It was food time. I opened the door and she was nowhere to be found. Really unusual for her, so I was confused. I walked into the kitchen to look for her and noticed something that made my heart sink. The furnace door was closed. I never close the furnace door and neither do my parents, because we want the cat to be able to get inside to catch mice. I recognized then that the thunk I'd heard could have been a heavy furnace door closing. I was completely frozen, convinced that there was someone right behind the door hiding from me. Now, I'd seen a lot of scary movies lately, and it could have been paranoia, but this felt awful and not right. I knew that I didn't want to give this potential person any reason to open the door, so I put on my best acting skills and pretended that I'd noticed nothing amiss. I did some baby talk to my cat and scooped out some food for her. I was super creeped out whenever I had to let the door out of my sight. I was basically keeping it in my vision at all times to see movement. After feeding the cat, I went back upstairs. I grabbed my mom and explained what had happened. She was skeptical and thought maybe one of the contractors had closed the door, but seeing how off-put I was, she went to go wake up my dad. My dad grabbed his gun and went downstairs. He screamed up at us to call the cops and get somewhere safe. We hid in the bedroom and we called the cops, who showed up and searched the entire house, not finding anyone. My dad explained to me after they'd gone through the house why he'd said to call the cops. He saw that the furnace room door and the back door to the outside were both wide open. So, person who was hiding in my furnace room while my entire family was home, let's not meet again. My girlfriend tested positive for chlamydia. Is it possible she didn't cheat? I'll get to the point. Been with this woman for 5 months. We have sex fairly often, couple times a week. Recently she wasn't feeling well, so went to a doctor to get tested if she's never had an STD test before, comes back as chlamydia. I decide to get a test too, as if she caught her before us. I definitely have it. We don't use protection, and if I had it first, I very much need to get it sorted out. Got the results today and it's negative. I'm apparently completely clean. Told her this and she made a comment. Pretty upset that I would think she cheated on me, which I told her I didn't, and are just confused. But the thought admittedly eats at me. I know the chance the test is wrong is probably wishful thinking, but is there a way to catch it not from sexual activity, and what is the likelihood it wouldn't pass on to me? Yes, I agree I should have gotten tested at the start, but given I have only ever slept with one person prior to this and believed her when she said she hasn't seen anyone in over a year plus, assumed she knew about STD tests and would have had a test at some point between then and now, I figured it was fine. I am fully fine with being called an effing idiot over that assumption, because that's kind of not what I'm upset about. As for condoms, she's allergic to latex, and again, I rolled dice on something I shouldn't have. I'm honestly kind of breaking down internally over all this. Thank you everyone for the advice and information. I'm going to take another test to be sure, and if it's negative, I will be talking with her about this. Divorced men of Reddit, what moment made you say I am filing for a divorce? After 15 years, I came across texts on her phone that completely blindsided me. I had no clue she was capable of cheating. She told me it was just texting and begged for forgiveness, and I caved. Then I discovered emails where she detailed things that made me feel sick. Reading them. Later I found out she was visiting a nurse service and this guy was one of her clients. She promised she was done with him. She professed her love for me, insisting that she wouldn't let 15 years go to waste like that. However, I was no longer buying into her promises. She announced that she was going out one night with a work friend and assured me she'd be home by night. Unbeknownst to her, Google Latitude was still showing me her location. Once I knew where she was heading, I called her dad and my best friend to keep me from doing anything foolish. My father-in-law offered to stay with the kids and wait for her to get home around 3 a.m. She sent me a nasty text, demanding to know where I thought I was. I texted her a screenshot of her GPS's location and informed her that I would be sending her some paperwork. She told me it wasn't what it looked like, and I'm still going to continue through the divorce process and take half of her money. Divorced men of Reddit, what moment made you say I am filing for a divorce? After 15 years, I came across texts on her phone that completely blindsided me. I had no clue she was capable of cheating. She told me it was just texting and begged for forgiveness, and I caved. Then I discovered emails where she detailed things that made me feel sick. Reading them. Later I found out she was visiting a nurse service and this guy was one of her clients. She promised she was done with him. She professed her love for me, insisting that she wouldn't let 15 years go to waste like that. However, I was no longer buying into her promises. She announced that she was going out one night with a work friend and assured me she'd be home by night. Unbeknownst to her, Google Latitude was still showing me her location. Once I knew where she was heading, I called her dad and my best friend to keep me from doing anything foolish. My father-in-law offered to stay with the kids and wait for her to get home around 3 a.m. She sent me a nasty text, demanding to know where I thought I was. I texted her a screenshot of her GPS's location and informed her that I would be sending her some paperwork. She told me it wasn't what it looked like, and I'm still going to continue through the divorce process and take half of her money. Pizza delivery drivers of Reddit, how did you manage to get late on the job? I used to work for Domino's back in the day, and one evening I got a delivery to an apartment complex. The order was pretty simple, just a large pepperoni pizza. I headed over, and when I got to the apartment, I knocked on the door. A young, stunning 19-year-old woman answered the door. She seemed a bit flustered and told me she didn't have enough cash to pay for the pizza. She looked embarrassed, and then out of nowhere, she hesitated before suggesting another form of payment before I could even process what she was saying. She leaned in and, well, let's just say she offered a special way of settling the bill. I was taken aback, to say the least, but I must admit it was a wild moment. I mean, it's not every day a pizza guy finds himself in that kind of situation. I won't go into all the juicy details, but let's just say that pizza delivery took a very unexpected turn. She ended up giving me top, and I came twice, and I lubed up my wire and finished inside her booty. I flipped her over and she spread her legs, and I plowed in like it was my last day on earth. I used a rubber, of course, but that was some of the best intercourse I've ever had. We finished up and she offered to share the pizza with me, and I gladly took 2 slices. My boss asked me why I was gone for so long, and I just told him I couldn't find the customer's room. I went to a massage parlor and got a happy ending by accident a couple of days ago. Obvious throwaway because I'm super embarrassed and don't want my friends to know. I'm a 32-year-old male and I had never had a massage before this Wednesday. I pulled a muscle in my shoulder moving some shit over the weekend and someone said, "Oh, you should get a massage," so I did some scouting around and found a place, made an appointment for an hour massage and went there. I was not intending a happy ending, didn't see anything that indicated this was a service that was available. A very small Asian woman massaged me and it was amazing. It loosened up my shoulders and I felt so much better. However, while on my stomach I started to get an erection. In my defense, the massage felt amazing. She was very attractive and I've been having kind of a dry spell and haven't been with a woman for almost a year. I got super nervous and she told me to roll over. So I did and I was pitching a very obvious tent under the towel she covered me with. She giggled. I was probably red as a tomato. She rubbed my shoulders while I stayed erect and after a little bit she stopped, and was rubbing my thighs super close to it. It made me so excited I was practically panting and then she said in broken English, "Happy ending? $50?" I was so nervous and aroused I didn't think I could speak, so I just nodded. She said, "You have 20 minutes left." Took off my towel and put more lotion on her hands and grabbed it and started stroking it. She also rubbed and squeezed my balls. It was honestly the best hand job I've ever had and I finished in probably 5 minutes with one of the most intense orgasms of my life. She cleaned me up, finished the rest of the massage by rubbing my thighs and legs which were still twitching, and that was that. I paid up front and left her a good tip. I'm super embarrassed and feel terrible that I paid for a woman to do that to me, and worse still, I feel really tempted to go back soon or even regularly, as it wasn't nearly as expensive as I thought something like that would be. I've been feeling lots of shame and post-nut clarity the last couple of days, but a part of me really wants to go again. What's the worst intimate experience I've ever had was with a goth girl. A few years ago, in my freshman year of college, I had my first intimate experience with a girl. I use that word lightly, as I have fooled around here and there before, throughout high school, typical 16-year-old bumping and grinding, but nothing serious. I met this hot goth chick during my first semester, and for me it was love at first sight. She was gorgeous. About 5'3" with dyed black hair and piercing blue eyes. I was a typical gamer guy. We were a match made in heaven, at least we should have been. We went on our first date. At some point while I was laughing, I knocked my glass of water over onto the tablecloth. The thing shattered. A piece caught itself in my skin. I winced pulling it out. It wasn't a big one. Hardly visible with the naked eye, but it hurt like a female dog. She just stared at me when I told her I had to go wash it off. She nodded at me, licking her lips, gaze fixed towards my hand. I thought nothing of it. In hindsight, I probably should have. Later that night, I took her back to my dorm with me. It was everything you would have imagined. We got to grinding, kissing, bumping, stripping. Eventually she had me pinned to the mattress. She told me she wanted to go down on me. I froze for a moment, scared, but eventually said yes. I watched her free me from my boxers, and then, well, she went about her thing. There should be a law against getting into it with goth chicks. It was pleasant at first, but I had an epiphany. I always knew she was a bit moody, being goth and all, but I didn't know she was into pain play as well. I learned this the hard way when she bit down really hard as I was pulling out, dragging her incisors on my PPE and tearing through skin. She was way into it and started licking up the blood. I had the most confusing climax I've ever had in my entire life. Then I had a lot of pain and cried for about 15 minutes as she tried to bandage it up and told me to suck it up. It isn't that bad. She explained to me that she believed she was a vampire. I told her I believed she was my ex. I kicked her out of my dorm and never talked to her again.
I have an intimate relationship with my childhood bully's mother, and it's effing awesome. I'm 24 and male. For context, as a young teen, he used to gang up with his friends and bully me for literally no reason. Well, we eventually grew up and school ended. But honestly, the bullying still FS with me. About 2 months ago, I recognized his mom at a bar. She's one of those young and hot moms, and I'm not the shy I used to be. She doesn't know who I am or what her son did. She was single and we hit it off, and she came to my place that night and I piped her like it was our wedding night even years later. Iffing hate her son so much, and dogging his mom has been incredible. And even though I did this initially purely for revenge, she's actually a wonderful person, and I want to see where this goes and hopefully at least be able to be civil with him. She told me she has a son about my age early on, which I know obviously. And this week she asked, since we've been together for a couple months and are serious, if I wanted to meet him this weekend. I said sure. We're having dinner Saturday night and I'm equally excited and nervous. I feel bad that this started as petty revenge because she deserves better than that. But the fact is, her son's a effing loser. I grew up, I got in better shape, I have a decent job and make good money while he still lives with his mom and doesn't work well. He's going to be in for a big surprise this weekend. She mentioned he was already uncomfortable that her new boyfriend is his age, but oh man, is he in for a world of hurt? Especially when I eventually become his stepdad, move into that house and tell him he needs to either get a job or get out as his stepdad. I won't let him be a burden to his mother anymore. And when he hears how vocal his mom is during SX, he's going to want to move out anyway unless he enjoys hearing me breed his mother every night. This weekend is going to be great. I can't wait to see the look on his face.
College students of Reddit, how did everyone find out you lost your V card? I'm currently in college and everyone says it's pretty easy to get action in college, but that just isn't true. I'm currently a sophomore and to be honest I was a pretty down bad guy. I never got invited to hang out with people or even got invited to parties that everyone could come to. One day I'm looking through my school Snapchat story and I noticed someone on a burner account saying they are selling meetups in the dorm building next to mine. As I said, I'm a pretty down bad guy and I get no action and my best friend is my right hand. The Snapchat story honestly looked fake, but I still added the snap just for some research purposes. I start talking to whoever was running the account and they sent me a list of prices and a short description of what the girl looked like. She was a freshman who was 5'2" and she was blonde with a petite frame as described in the description. She was selling meetups for $150 for 10 minutes and I'm not going to lie, I'm pretty broke. I agreed that was a fair price and I would have her cash ready. I told my parents I needed money for a book for one of my classes and my father sent it over with no hesitation. I was just so eager to lose my V card and I was tired of my right hand. She told me to meet her in the dorm building next to mine's in a certain bathroom. I arrive there and enter the bathroom and go all the way down to the last stall and that's where I saw her on the other side of the stall. Her description matched how she actually looked, which was surprising, and she told me we had to be fast. One thing led to another and my pants were down and she was bent over. Since it was my first time I honestly didn't have an idea what to do, so I was just trying to play it off and asking her to help me stick it in. I finally got in and it was the best feeling of my life. Midway through I heard someone come into the bathroom and I immediately covered her mouth because she was being pretty loud. Whoever entered the bathroom came all the way to the last stall and started using the bathroom. I guess he noticed 2 pairs of shoes and congratulated me and I let out a little chuckle and he told me he wouldn't snitch. He finished using the bathroom and we start going back at it and that's when I heard someone standing on the stall next to us. I realized the guy never actually left and he stuck out his hand to shake my hand to congratulate me again. He was recording, but at the time I didn't have a clue because I was so into doing her. Anyways, he finally actually left and my 15 minutes finished up and I never even finished. She told me she would just help me finish real fast and she wasn't lying at all. I give her the money and we part our ways, and a few hours later I'm laying in bed and I'm scrolling through the school Snapchat again and I notice someone recording a video from an aerial view. Immediately knew it was me because in the video I looked up at MT. Redditors, what's the secret that would ruin your life if it came out? I used to hear voices for years. It started when I'd walk into my room and say hello to my poster of Lane from the anime serial Experiments. Lane. I'd always personified objects, but eventually she started responding over time. I could talk to her elsewhere. I'd pull her up when I was sitting in class or riding the bus and I'd put on headphones so nobody would notice I was talking to myself since it was barely audible. Eventually, Lane told me she was a god and I was too, and there were 2 others, but they didn't really like me. So they would almost never talk to me. A few years later, she started being really mean and it turned out there was another voice who was just pretending to be Lane named Misery. This one was stereotypical. Everything I did was wrong and I had to pay for my actions. I should hurt myself if I was ungraceful, everyone hated me. Stuff like that. Lane split again. And this time she was sisterly. When I was upset and crying myself to sleep, I could feel her holding me and telling me everything would be alright. Misery looked different but could look like Lane if she wanted to fool me. Although she would turn back into herself when I called her out on it, the 2 Lanes all looked the same. So I could only tell who they were when they started responding to me. After a while, they all just disappeared. I guess I got sane because during the peak, it never occurred to me. I was hearing voices. They truly were gods who were speaking to me. And later during the time period, I realized that I was hallucinating with delusions of grandeur. Then at one point, I realized that there was more of me and less of them. When I pulled them up, it was a conscious effort and part of their responses were forced on my part. Then eventually I just gave them up. They were so weak that it was really just like talking to myself and not to other people that lived in my head. That's not my secret. I've mentioned it to a few very select people that I truly trust. My secret is that I miss them. I miss them with all my heart, even Misery. They were friends and family. They were close to me. They understood me and they were always there for me. Now, even with real friends and family, there's nobody that close. I can't just pull up someone to talk to when I'm lonely. I have to call up a real person and that person never knows what I want to talk about or what I'm hiding from them. They only know what I say. Lane would always call me on my BS and make me keep changing my answer until I told her the truth. Misery could always find my biggest weaknesses, which allowed me to work on strengthening them sisterly. Lane could calm me down in a way that's unimaginable. You can't comprehend how good it feels to be hugged by someone inside of you. And now I feel lonelier than I have in years because I almost never think of that time or remember how it felt tonight. I'm sitting by myself at 2 a.m. and all I can think about is how much I want a voice to talk to. It's been so long since I had one and I'd give anything to have another psychotic break so I could get back all my friends that live in my head. I once had a psychotic episode where I could talk to clouds and I could feel how much they loved me, the clouds, the trees, the birds, they were all my friends and they all loved me and they all wanted me to be happy. I had that feeling on mushrooms once. Everything in the world loved me, every single thing, the house, the ceiling, the lamp, each blade of grass, it all loved me. And it was the best feeling I have ever known. That was the best night of my life. I can't tell you how much I want to feel that again. I just have no way of tracking them down again. Being crazy feels amazing whether it's good or bad, Even the bad crazy where I'd stay awake all night because I knew something was going to get me in my sleep and I'd try to claw the evil out of my skin. Even. That's preferable to being normal because the intensity is indescribable. I miss everything about being crazy. I miss it more than I can possibly describe. Redditors, what's the secret that would ruin your life if it came out? I used to hear voices for years. It started when I'd walk into my room and say hello to my poster of Lane from the anime serial Experiments. Lane. I'd always personified objects, but eventually she started responding over time. I could talk to her elsewhere. I'd pull her up when I was sitting in class or riding the bus and I'd put on headphones so nobody would notice I was talking to myself since it was barely audible. Eventually, Lane told me she was a god and I was too, and there were two others, but they didn't really like me. So they would almost never talk to me. A few years later, she started being really mean and it turned out there was another voice who was just pretending to be Lane named Misery. This one was stereotypical. Everything I did was wrong and I had to pay for my actions. I should hurt myself if I was ungraceful, everyone hated me. Stuff like that. Lane split again. And this time she was sisterly. When I was upset and crying myself to sleep, I could feel her holding me and telling me everything would be alright. Misery looked different but could look like Lane if she wanted to fool me. Although she would turn back into herself when I called her out on it, the two Lanes all looked the same. So I could only tell who they were when they started responding to me. After a while, they all just disappeared. I guess I got sane because during the peak, it never occurred to me. I was hearing voices. They truly were gods who were speaking to me. And later during the time period, I realized that I was hallucinating with delusions of grandeur. Then at one point, I realized that there was more of me and less of them. When I pulled them up, it was a conscious effort and part of their responses were forced on my part. Then eventually I just gave them up. They were so weak that it was really just like talking to myself and not to other people that lived in my head. That's not my secret. I've mentioned it to a few very select people that I truly trust. My secret is that I miss them. I miss them with all my heart, even Misery. They were friends and family. They were close to me. They understood me and they were always there for me. Now, even with real friends and family, there's nobody that close. I can't just pull up someone to talk to when I'm lonely. I have to call up a real person and that person never knows what I want to talk about or what I'm hiding from them. They only know what I say. Lane would always call me on my BS and make me keep changing my answer until I told her the truth. Misery could always find my biggest weaknesses, which allowed me to work on strengthening them sisterly. Lane could calm me down in a way that's unimaginable. You can't comprehend how good it feels to be hugged by someone inside of you. And now I feel lonelier than I have in years because I almost never think of that time or remember how it felt tonight. I'm sitting by myself at 2 a.m. and all I can think about is how much I want a voice to talk to. It's been so long since I had one and I'd give anything to have another psychotic break so I could get back all my friends that live in my head. I once had a psychotic episode where I could talk to clouds and I could feel how much they loved me, the clouds, the trees, the birds, they were all my friends and they all loved me and they all wanted me to be happy. I had that feeling on mushrooms once. Everything in the world loved me, every single thing, the house, the ceiling, the lamp, each blade of grass, it all loved me. And it was the best feeling I have ever known. That was the best night of my life. I can't tell you how much I want to feel that again. I just have no way of tracking them down again. Being crazy feels amazing whether it's good or bad, even the bad crazy where I'd stay awake all night because I knew something was going to get me in my sleep and I'd try to claw the evil out of my skin. Even. That's preferable to being normal because the intensity is indescribable. I miss everything about being crazy. I miss it more than I can possibly describe. I won the lottery 5 years ago and kept it a secret from my poor family. After taxes, my winnings came to just shy of $4 million. I paid off all my debts, hired an accountant, fixed some things on my truck and put most of it in savings. I kept my job, didn't move and kept my mouth shut. And with good reason. My brother is a substance abuser. My sister is a low-functioning escort and my mother is a selfish jerk. She blames everything wrong with her on my father who passed away 10 years ago. I didn't want them scrambling to pretend to care about me for cash. I've been dating a girl for about 3 years now and recently asked her to marry me. She said yes. I bought a modest ring just over what people would expect. Given my known employment this weekend, I'm going to lay everything out for her as I now truly know she's in it for me and not money. It's going to be liberating to be able to buy what I want to take care of my friends. Totally worth the wait. That's the biggest thing for me. It started out as keeping it away from my family and maintaining the life I built on my own. It just kind of snowballed from the dough. She really liked my concern and turned into this thing. I just carried on as normal and took my time knowing if it's right time will tell. So my plan was a relaxing evening on the odd weekend. We both managed to be free from work or other plans. We went to an early dinner at one of our favorite Italian places, an inexpensive little diner nearby with great appetizers, and then finally went to see Star Wars. After the movie, we grabbed some drinks for the evening and went home to relax. We skipped the weekly small talk about work, friends and the accompanying few drinks. I told her I wanted to be open about everything with each other leading up to the marriage. She got kind of quiet. A little guarded and said, "Well, yeah. So do I?" Pausing with that. "Look, people get when they want you to keep talking." I told her we were never truly going to have to worry about money, that she could do whatever she wanted with her job or stay at home or change careers. Anything because I had north of $3 million in the bank. Her response was slow. What are you talking about? What kind of thing? I got up and pulled a financial statement I'd printed out and stashed in the coffee table drawer, handed it to her and told her I'd won it all. A couple years before we met, she started uncontrollably crying and looked terrified. I got really worried and started explaining. I kept it hidden because I didn't want my crappy family hunting me down. But I didn't want people around me to change or to lose my friends. Then she started apologizing, saying she had a secret to share as well. She had about $40,000 in student loan and credit card debt and thought it was going to break the engagement. She thought I was so financially responsible that there was no way I'd take on that debt because she never told me about it. It's why she'd been so open to a prenup in the vague conversations we'd had about it before, why she'd never brought up or talked about money. So, after a long conversation about openness and trust, we hashed out some ideas on what we would agree on for the prenup in regards to premier debt and assets. I'm going to pay her debt off after we're married. So the tax issue is less of a concern and all of my winnings will remain mine. Should we divorce? Interest and dividends will be marital assets? I'm very pleased with how things played out and we're in a great place for it. We're working with attorneys and my accountant this week and I'll be putting my 2-week notice in at work. She wants to keep her job, but will request some time off so we can take a vacation and settle into actually enjoying some money. Redditors, what's the worst reason you hooked up with someone? She was divorced after her marriage failed within a year. Guy was a total piece of shit. We had been very close friends for almost 15 years at the time, though it somehow never worked out. Hardly any gap where we both were single. Anyway, we met up loads after her recent divorce. She started being rather upfront about wanting to see me, which was somewhat out of character for her being so adamant towards me, started hinting at it at some point, but being a man means I only really got those hints in retrospect. Then I met a woman online, a very nice woman, had a first date with her. My best friend wanted to meet up again, so we did. We went for breakfast. She was on about how her ex-husband neglected her sexual needs for most of the time, followed by telling me how good she thinks I looked and how we should just get it over with. So I decided to go for it. Since I'd only been on one date with this woman, I'd always felt my friend was very attractive, so let's go. We went to my place, drank tea for a bit, she repeatedly told me not to get feelings, which I had in the past, then got it on and it was amazing. She thanked me afterwards. I asked if we were going to make this a regular thing and she said it all depended on me and how I would act on future dates with that woman I met, then left home. After I kind of processed what happened, I went to my best friend, who happens to be gay, and he said it was about time we got it out of the way, followed by if I was going to have sex with my other friends now, too. Spoilers, I didn't. I decided to plan a second date with the woman I met. I didn't develop feelings for my close friend afterwards. She had some issues she needed to work out, which I needed to do in the past and have, with her support as well. I met up with my close friend a few times after. It wasn't that awkward, but she kept dropping huge hints like how she could never have a one-night stand. Feelings had to be involved. I still didn't realize she meant she had developed feelings for me, cause men need the subtlety of a sledgehammer when it comes to this. I kinda laughed it off, thinking we had a solid enough friendship to do such a thing. Besides, I was still dating that woman I had met. Quite soon she started getting colder and eventually told me she wanted to break off contact completely. I wasn't too surprised, since the friendship we had shifted enormously, especially in retrospect. Later the woman I was dating told me my close friend had given her some snark behind my back and she did not deserve this at all. In conclusion, I can honestly say my close friend and I literally fucked up our friendship. I don't regret a thing in that regard. The woman I was dating is my wife of almost 4 years now and we have a son together. The only thing I regret is the timing, right in between the first and second date of my now wife. She deserves more than that. Before people ask, my wife knows. I told her before we decided to move in with one another, since she deserved to know what she was getting into. I told her it was out of character for me to do such a thing, that I only regret the timing, but that in the past I've made it a thing to only go on dates with one woman at the time. I felt it wasn't cheating, we weren't an item back then, but the timing made it questionable and she needed to know before we got to the serious stage of living together. I got a handy from my girlfriend and all my juices went all over my face. My girlfriend, 18, and I, 19, usually spends time at my house to get our freak on every week. She ended up getting her period 2 days before the day we planned to meet up. Considering it's both our first relationship with lust involved, we're no better than cats in heat, so that didn't stop us like most people our age would, and in the end we just settled for foreplay. On the day we got to my place, I laid an extra layer of sheet on the bed for her and I got to work for her. The neighbors 2 houses down most likely knew my name when I was finished. My fingers were sore from all the rubbing I did and her body looked defeated. I had done my job and now it was time for my reward. With the little strength she started to give me head and jerk me off in between while I lay down. My toes were curling, my body was tingling, my head spinning like I had vertigo. I was never given this for more than 3 minutes before, so it was overstimulating to the point where I could have tear up, but I couldn't tell her stop. While in my own world with pleasure I could felt something coming. What I didn't realize was that my little guy was curved towards me while this was all going down. I couldn't hold it any longer and the best suffering I've had so far came to an end. But what I saw for a split second was millions of potential lawyers, doctors, athletes and deadbeats coming towards my face in their white liquid form. I got hit in my eye and in my hair, which as a black man with dreads was a nightmare to get out. Almost like this was revenge to my semen for ruining their what could be lives. I quickly ran to the bathroom to wash it out my burning eyes and the shower to get it out my locks. In the end my pain did calm down, and my girlfriend never shushed about it once she made sure I was okay. I must now be the first ever man to give himself a facial. A memory that'll live with me for lifetimes.
Men of Reddit, what's the dumbest way you managed to get laid? I met a girl in my college science lecture and asked her out to dinner. She agreed. A few nights later we are out as we are concluding dinner. I tell her the dessert at this restaurant sucks, but I have some better dessert at my place. I was being sincere as I had some homemade dessert. A coworker, significant other, had made me recently and it was delicious and I had to share it with her. They were some of the best fudge brownies I've ever had and I had some vanilla ice cream to pair with it. We headed back to mine's and she asked to use the bathroom. I showed her where the bathroom was and I went into the kitchen to prep dessert. I soon heard her call my name from the bedroom. The bedroom was connected to the bathroom by the closet, which I found odd. I didn't build the house, so don't ask why it's like that. But anyways, I walked in the room and the girl was very bare and in a position of preparedness for lack of a better term, and I'm standing there dumbfounded with a big bowl full of brownies and ice cream with 2 spoons. One thing led to another and we did the deed. The intercourse was great and the brownies afterward were banging. By far it was definitely one of my more eventful evenings. Redditors, what happened when you tried to hit it from behind but it wouldn't fit? I was just 18 and my girlfriend and I were feeling a bit adventurous. We snuck into her parents' bedroom thinking we'd try something new. Yeah, you know where this is going. We'd heard stories, seen things online, and thought we'd give it a shot. So there we were both nervous and excited. She'd picked up some cream thinking it had helped things slide in smoothly, but let me tell you, that didn't exactly make things easier. Slowly, we tried to make it work, but no matter how much cream we used, it just wasn't happening. We were determined, though, 2 teenagers on a mission. After a while of awkward maneuvering and some giggles, there was this moment where something finally popped. It was like a rush of relief and a jolt of excitement all at once. I managed to wiggle my way in and let me tell you, it was a tight fit. The moment I was in, it was like a switch flipped. Instinct took over and I started thrusting like my life depended on it, and before we knew it, it was over. I dumped one inside and we collapsed onto the bed. I was honestly so disappointed in myself because I was officially a part of the 2 Pump Chump Club. I started to apologize to my girlfriend and she assured me that it was okay and we can go for another round.
Women of Reddit, how did you find out your boyfriend was getting happy endings? I'm 22F and my boyfriend is 27 meters. Everything has been great. I thought we have been together for 2 years and lived together for 1 year. My boyfriend gets weekly massages because he works construction, so he's sore all the time, which I'm fine with. It happened the other day. He was showering and his phone got a text and I took a peek. BC, I'm nosy like that. It was from a friend and it said something like, "Thanks for the recommendation and love, the happy ending." I was confused what it meant, so I asked him once he was back. At first he was brushing it off as if it was nothing, but I had Googled the term so I knew what it was. I kept it in to explain. Finally, he admitted to getting a hand job at the end of his massages, but he said it was a normal thing for massages and it was a natural end to release everything. I asked him why he would cheat on me and I could give him all the hand jobs and segs he wants. He said, it's not cheating since it's part of the whole massage routine. Plus these women he doesn't really know and has no feelings. Also, he said, I don't give him all the segs he needs. This made me feel bad. BC, we only have segs if he initiates it, which is maybe once a week, Ike, but I'm willing to do more. Anyway. We are still fighting and not speaking, and he's been gone for a while. Not sure what to do if I'm making too big a deal of this. It's not like he's xing anyone. It's just a tug on his dick. Is it worth breaking up over? Then again, he never told me this was happening. Maybe he's done doing things behind my back. I'm so confused. Men of Reddit, how did you catch your wife cheating and what did you do to her? On some Saturday morning in March, just a couple of hours after I caught my ex-wife cheating on me, I got a visit from the police. The guy, she was with her, that I'd found out about them and called the police, concerned for her safety. She wasn't returning either of our calls. The police checked the house and my text messages to make sure she wasn't in the house with me and that I hadn't threatened her safety. I'm not a violent person, but that day I had taken down all the paintings in our house and cut them to shreds in the garage. One of the cops stopped on the way out and turned to me to say, I know what you're going through, and I can see the kind of person you are. You are legally within your right to do what you want in this house, so long as it doesn't interfere with your neighbor's well-being. But if you do tear this house apart, I can tell you're the kind of guy that's going to feel bad for it later. She's not worth that. Then he just walked out. His words had all but robbed me of my anger. I was pissed because I wanted to continue to be angry at her, but he was right. As emotional stability began to return, it hit me. I could still dismantle the house without damaging it. So I grabbed my tools and in the subsequent 10 hours, I dismantled everything in the house that could be unscrewed. I spared nothing. The kitchen appliances, all the furniture in the study, the 3 bedrooms, the office, the dining room den, and finally the living room. I was very careful not to damage anything. I neatly and gently stacked the parts and pieces of everything I dismantled. I then put all the screws in a shoebox and took them with me. Men of Reddit, do you think all women cheat? Yes, but it depends on how you define cheating. Women crave validation from others much more than men. Women tend to make male platonic friends. These platonic friends usually want more than to be in the friend zone and contently compliment and beg the women for a chance. It's common for many women to knowingly have a male friend that desires them. They keep them around in order to build up their ego. Men are like soup. You always want to have some on the back burner. The backup mate hypothesis contends that even people experiencing relatively high relationship satisfaction benefit from cultivating backup mates because nothing in life or love comes with a guarantee. Does the mate switching hypothesis explain female infidelity? Eon essays? On the flip side, if a man had a platonic female friend that constantly begged the guy for a date/sex, he would be viewed as a player or a potential cheat. Most women would not tolerate desperate women hanging around their men. Yet most men are expected to accept women with male friends that obviously want more emo. This is a form of cheating because the woman in this case knows the intent of the man in question that keeps him around because his validation makes her feel good. And in a worst case scenario, if she becomes angry or upset with her current boyfriend/husband, she can defer to her platonic friend for a date or sex. Not all, but many women operate this way. I have older sisters and cousins. Never fool yourself, a woman male friend or her potential lovers by choice. Parents, what did your child do that was so despicable that you will never forgive them? I regret giving birth to this devil every day. This Saturday, my son will have been sober for 18 months. He got his GED this year and he starts at community college. At the end of August, he finally has a job that I didn't get for him. Soon he will be moving into his own apartment and he hasn't missed a single appointment with his therapist. He has done everything you would expect of a precocious 17-year-old who hit a rough patch after meeting with a particularly bad influence. He's 29. His mother and I gave him every opportunity we could. I don't expect any praise for that because unlike my son, I don't expect praise for doing what you're supposed to. She and I worked hard to give him a loving, stable, comfortable, supportive home. We were involved in his school. We introduced him to music and sports and culture. We fed him healthy meals and we played with him. He started shoplifting at 15. The first time we caught him, we bodily dragged him back to the store, made him return the copy of Grand Theft Auto and apologize, and offered to pay for any damages. The second time we caught him, we did the same thing. The third time we started going to family therapy. Therapy seemed to go well, and after a few sessions, the therapist asked for a few one-on-one meetings with him. After 2 of those, the police came knocking on our door because the little brat had concocted some story about how we were a religious call to attack him at breakfast every Saturday, and the dumb therapist actually believed him. Rational heads prevailed. We fired the therapist and he went through 6 more in as many months until eventually we couldn't find anyone who would take him as a patient. By 16, he was drinking. Then we found grass in his bedroom and in our bedroom. He started leaving needles in glass where he knew we'd eventually find them just to mess with us. I know this because he said so. In those exact words. He had his first intervention and first trip to rehab that year and his first relapse. He had to repeat a year of high school at 17, which meant he was now the ringleader of a group of other young idiots who saw him as this totemic mentor shaman who could hook them up with whatever they wanted. I'm also damn sure he started getting with one of his gangs, 13-year-old sister around then, but I had nothing to go on but my own instincts. So all I could do was tell her parents to keep an eye on her. No charges were ever pressed and the family never spoke to me again after that. But they did pull both of their kids out of that school and my son was furious at me for daring to not let him continue committing this crime while I was away. He spent an uncharacteristic night at home and on his best behavior after his mother went to sleep, he followed her to her bedroom. He took a knife with him. He crept into the room, straddled her, put the blade to her throat and attacked her. I don't know exactly what happened next. I know he held her down. I know she fought. I know he stabbed her. I know she got away and locked herself in the bathroom before he could catch her. I hope that means she kicked him good in the groin. I know she broke the window and screamed for help. I know he ran. I know she was lucky. The ambulance got to her before she bled to death. I know he called his friends to brag and beg for a ride. I know the police caught him. I know if I'd been home or if I'd caught him, I'd have killed him with my bare hands. The state tried my son as an adult. He pled out, but only after making his mother testify and smiling the whole time. She divorced me a month after his sentencing. I looked too much like him. She took her own life. A year later, I would be a liar if I said I didn't blame him for her death because I absolutely do. He was sober when she went to her room, sober when he pulled out his knife, sober when he climbed on top of her, sober when he attacked her, sober when he stabbed her, sober when he ran, sober when he called his friends to brag, and sober when the police found him. When I made the mistake of visiting him after the divorce, he laughed and said I could never satisfy her. When I made the mistake of visiting him after she was gone, he laughed again. I should have killed him right there. It is to my eternal shame that I did not. They let him out. After serving 3 years, he spent the next 6 years on the streets, in and out of rehab, on and off other people's couches, and would grace me every 6 months or so with a phone call demanding money. Eventually, I refused to talk to him unless it was to drive him back to rehab, and I stopped completely after he stole my wallet 2 years ago. He came to my house with his aunt in tow and crocodile tears in his eyes. He pretended to apologize. I slammed the door. His aunt barges in to try to shame me into forgiving. The man who attacked my wife caused her death and laughed about it. He slashed my tires, threw a brick through a window, and drove off in her car. His aunt had no idea that he'd taken our keys or that he'd been armed the whole time. She blamed me. He guilted her into letting him stay with her. Went to rehab and relapsed. Then went again, and here we are. My son has pretended to reform before. He has even convinced himself once or twice, but he always backslides, always relapses, always finds new ways to disappoint, and always hurts other people for his own short-sighted benefit. His aunt is already at the stage where she's pretending she must have forgotten where she put some knick-knack or piece of jewelry, and has already told me to F off after I've warned her of what my son can, will, and has done before, and what he will do again now that he thinks she's weak. When he messes up again, when he hurts someone else with his ceaseless BSS, I will not be there to pick up after him. I am through with him. I am through with his aunt. I cannot talk to her without being overcome with rage and shame as I see the stupid hope I used to have that my son would ever amount to anything, and that I do not need any more disappointment and failure in my life. I am not proud of my son. I am sorry for inflicting him upon the world. What is the cringiest thing you've done to woo a crush? When I was in 6th grade, my parents talked me into going to a week-long church camp I knew of but didn't know personally any of the kids going, but they sold me on the idea that everyone would praise Jesus, ride horses, and have a good time. I decided to go. It was like a 6-hour drive in one of those big white vans. Quickly, everyone started whipping out their CD cases and exchanging music, and I was instantly stressing. I only had 2 CDs, Britney Spears' Baby One More Time, and Everclear. I was a really weird kid. Everyone was trying to talk to me about music, and I had honestly never heard of any of the bands they were talking about. I just wanted to jam some Britney to myself. So naturally I went the elitist route set. I had all of that music, and I was listening to some new underground private stuff they hadn't heard of. Once we got to camp, all I was thinking was, let's find some friends quick because I can't talk to these kids anymore. I went to the pool and made some friends with a few older kids. There were 3 girls, 2 guys, and me. They were all in 8th grade, so obviously they were really cool. Plus I thought the girls were really hot. I figured this would be the best time, if any, to get my first kiss. Their windshield wipers were turned up to the maximum with all the game. 6th grade me was fitting. We decided to leave the pool and walk around the camp until we all had to have a group meetup. The cabins were separated by grade, so they said they would walk by the 6th grade cabin and pick me up. The first thing I did was put on my freshest outfit. Great time to break out my fresh white t-shirt. Can't forget my jean shorts. This was pre-faded denim, so these were the industrial bright blue jean shorts. It's summer in Texas, so I might as well top the outfit off with knee-high white socks, and for the shorties, Doc Martens. I looked like a weird redneck lumberjack. So I walked out and they were kind of like WTF, but whatever. It's kiss time. We started walking and one of the older guys farted and all the girls laughed. Boom, found my in. My friend Travis and I had been making fart jokes for quite some time, so I was up to speed in this area of humor. Bam, the other guy farts and all the girls laugh even harder. Got him. Now I'm thinking all I have to do is drop the biggest fart and literally the girls are going to laugh so hard. They're going to each kiss me one by one. I started clenching and squeezing my stomach as hard as I could. I was walking like a newborn deer. Then I felt it got a big one ready, so instead of just dropping it out and laughing, I wanted to make a big show about it. I ran in front of the small group, squatted down, turned just my head around and forcefully went. Number 2, if you didn't know this before, early 90s, denim was the least forgiving fabric in the world. Everyone knew I went. Number 2, it was running down my leg being soaked up by my knee-high socks. Instantly I just reacted and started running, kicking up number 2, like mud off a truck. I'd never been to this camp before, so I was just running for anything. I found a bathroom and tossed the socks, boxers and shirt, but I couldn't drop the jorts. I couldn't just walk across the church camp naked. Plus, at this point I was thinking maybe they didn't really see it. I was really confident in my speed at the time, so I was thinking I could say, that's my thing. I dropped giant farts and run before the smell catches me. Come to find out, not only were the 5 people I went in front of outside the bathroom waiting for me, but there were like 25 kids. Instantly I just ran in my Docs and J's combo back to the cabin I was staying in with the other kids chasing me and yelling. I ran to my bed to find all the music nerds I drove up with going through my CD case. It only had the 2 CDs.
They were like, WDF, thought you had tons of secret music, bro.
Wait, did you number 2, your pants? I really thought farting would impress these girls. I lost my favorite pair of JSS and Pride that day. What is the cringiest thing you've done to woo a crush? When I was in 6th grade, my parents talked me into going to a week-long church camp I knew of but didn't know personally any of the kids going, but they sold me on the idea that everyone would. My mother always made me play hide and seek with her. It was just her and me, and we played at 9. Each time, without failure, she told me to ignore her during the game. She told me that she would purposefully try to trick me, but, if you really wanted to trick somebody, why tell them anything?
What did your girlfriend do after she saw that your banana was less than 3 inches? I'm with my girl and we're about to take things to the next level when she reaches down and grabs my banana. But then she looks up at me, disappointment written all over her face. Is that it? She says, pointing at my manhood. I'll admit I was embarrassed, but I tried to play it cool and said, hey, it's not the size that matters, it's how you use it, but she wasn't having it. She stood up, grabbed her stuff, and stormed out of my room. I was devastated. I thought she was different, but I guess she was just like all the other girls, only interested in guys with big bananas. But then something amazing happened. I got a call from my girlfriend and she sounded really upset. She said she'd been thinking about what happened between us and she realized that she was being shallow and unfair. She said she didn't care about the size of my banana. She cared about me. I couldn't believe it. I was so happy I started crying. We got back together and things have been great ever since. It's been a few weeks since my girlfriend and I had that conversation. It feels like we're closer now, more connected. We've spent a lot of time talking about things, exploring each other in different ways. I've never felt this comfortable with anyone before, and I think she feels the same way. Last night we were lying in bed talking about everything and nothing. I was feeling brave, so I brought up the incident from a few weeks ago. I wanted to know why she reacted the way she did. She looked at me and I could see the pain in her eyes. I'm sorry. She said I was wrong. I let my insecurities get the best of me and I took it out on you. I shouldn't have said what I said. I reached over and took her hand. It's okay. I said, I understand. We all have insecurities. She smiled at me and I could feel the tension in the room dissipate. We kissed and it felt like fireworks were going off inside me. I knew I loved this girl. We started fooling around and I could feel myself getting hard, but instead of feeling self-conscious, I felt confident. I knew she loved me for who I was, not for the size of my banana. We made love that night and it was like nothing I'd ever experienced before. We were both completely present in the moment, enjoying each other's bodies, giving and receiving pleasure. Afterwards, we lay there exhausted and content. I looked at her and I knew I never wanted to be without her. I love you, I said. She looked at me and her eyes were filled with emotion.
What's the most disgusting thing you've ever done? James and I are cousins. He is 34 and I'm 18, we have been close all of our lives. We had planned to go clubbing together for some cousin bonding time. I was supposed to come over to his house and have him drive us there, but when I got to his house, his wife was in terrible shape. I admit I was really disappointed, because James had promised to teach me to dance at the club but now we couldn't go. I told her I'd just go ahead and go home, but she said no, James and I should go out. So he got home and she verbally pushed us out the door. We went to the club, danced, drank a little, then he got tired of me stepping on his feet and we went to a nearby wine place and talked. By the time the place closed, neither of us was in any shape to drive. I was really hammered. We both were. I remember us arguing, because he told me I was coming home and I told him I'd already paid for a hotel. I got an Uber and we were going to share. We got to my hotel and he said he'd seen me to my room because at that point I wasn't walking straight. We were being goofy, singing and stuff. I threw a shoe at him in my room, missed by a mile, and he fell out of his chair laughing. We were that level intoxicated. I blacked out and do not remember anything else. In the morning, I woke up with a massive headache. James was in the bed next to me, unclothed, and my butt was sore. I snuck out of bed, gathered my clothes, then went in the bathroom and got dressed. And I cried. A lot. I was sick a couple times. I guess I woke James up, because I heard knocking at the door, James saying he's sorry and will I please come out so we can talk. I came out a sniveling, smelly, crying mess. I asked him if we had intimacy and he nodded. I told him I was sorry and I was a terrible person and kept rambling. He gave me a rag to wipe my face and started talking. The more we talked about it, the more I understood we both had a fun time, despite me remembering the act or not. I couldn't help but have my mind wander into repeating such an experience with James. I also asked what we were going to do about Anne. Sadly, he said he felt he should tell her the truth and it was probably best if I wasn't there. A few days later I got a long text from Anne. It was kinder than I feel I deserve. She said she would like to speak to me about what happened but not right away. She doesn't want me to contact her or James for a while. She did say she wouldn't tell anyone. I texted her back and told her that's okay. All while James and I are still texting, and are planning on getting hammered in a hotel room again next week. We're still not ready to have intimacy sober, but maybe someday.
People who caught their partner cheating. What was the aftermath? Back in February, my newlywed wife went away for a week to see her family and friends, which we had moved across the country from for her fellowship. I didn't come with her. While she was staying with her family, she called me. I could sense something off in her voice, so I asked her what was wrong. She told me how unhappy and alone she has felt since we had moved. She said I felt more like a roommate, and that I had ruined her fellowship for her because I didn't care for the area we were living in. I felt incredibly guilty hearing this. We had only been married 5 months, and she was already suggesting marriage counseling. I didn't protest. I was eager to work things out, as I adored and loved her very much. Over the next several weeks I was planning activities for us every weekend, on top of doing all the cooking and cleaning in the apartment. I'd always done this though. We had our first marriage counseling session and my wife said she feared that maybe we were just too different or incompatible. Hearing this felt like a gut punch. Where was this concern prior to moving and getting married? A few weeks later we went out for a long walk after work and some drinks. She told me she was feeling better about things, and I felt a huge sigh of relief. The next day we went out for breakfast, spent the day together, and after that I took her out to a very nice restaurant for dinner. From there we went to the hot tub and had some passionate intimacy. I felt like we were starting to get out of the valley. The day after. I'll never forget this day. I woke up early, and despite the last few days seemingly going well I still didn't feel like things were quite right. When my wife had told me 2 months prior she was unhappy, I confided this to my mother. My mother's first comment to me was there might be someone in her office. I didn't want to believe that, but it was always in the back of my head. I was up early as I mentioned, and my curiosity got the best of me so I checked her phone. Sure enough, there was someone in the office. Someone she was texting minutes after we had intimacy. Someone she had been sending explicit pics to, meeting up with, and planning future dates with. I was crushed, but then I exploded. For the last several weeks I had been beaten down thinking I was the cause of the relationship falling apart, only to find out her affair began coincidentally a few days before I received her phone from her parents' house. I woke her up and asked her what the F is this? At that point, I just needed to unload. I called her every name in the book to break her down and to hurt her. I then called her affair partner, but he didn't pick up, so I left him some threatening messages about laying the smack down on him, and exposing them in the office. He was a subordinate of hers, and engaged himself. Maybe his fiancée would like to know? At that point, I felt I just needed to leave. I told her she needs to figure out what she wants, because she crossed the line. I went back home, but before I did she asked me to continue counseling remotely so we could repair things. I still foolishly loved her and agreed. Over the next several weeks in counseling, it became evident that she wasn't taking any accountability. She harped on the hateful things I said to her after my discovery, and how my threats to her affair partner made her view me as potentially violent, and this made her afraid of me. This is despite me never laying a hand on anyone in my life, something she knew. The counselor sided with her and my wife took this as an opportunity to bash me as toxic and manipulative. I wanted my wife to agree to an intensive marriage retreat weekend after her fellowship ended. As we're discussing it, a coworker of hers texted me, asking if I knew that my wife was cheating on me. It turns out the affair never stopped, and my separation allowed it to turn into a full-blown relationship. Everyone in the office knew, but were hesitant to tell me. She was still parading around work, talking about me like I was still living with her and all was well. I obviously had already discovered it 2 months prior, but now I knew that I was just being strung along. At that point, I had it. I took the evidence that I saved in April, and sent it to her HR department after calling them. I knew the email addresses of several of her coworkers and CC'd them. I sent the most salacious stuff to her parents, siblings, best friends, mutual friends, and best of all, the HR department of her next employer. I let her file for divorce, as I knew that would be the end result of my revenge campaign, and it's something I should have done anyway. From what I'm told, she was terminated from her fellowship, and the job she was supposed to start this month. Apparently she's also emotionally distraught due to me humiliating her to family and friends, as well as destroying her reputation in the short term.
I think my husband slept with his girl best friend. My husband of 4 years and I have never had any issues until he introduced me to his best friend Laura. We had an argument because he didn't tell me about her for our whole relationship and he had been sneaking to see her and hang out with her at parties when I was sleeping, believing that he was working overtime. I was hurt by this and my first thought immediately went to infidelity, but I found all of their texts to be platonic after he willingly told me to look. I thought she was nice at first since when I first met her. That was until there was a get-together for her mother's anniversary and my husband and I were invited. I was okay with this and quite excited since I wanted to make more female friends and have girls' nights out to relieve my work stress since my job is difficult and I make 7 figures. I walked into the house with my husband and she ran to him happily and immediately wrapped her whole body around his arm and dragged him off to the garden. He didn't even come to get me or anything after being dragged away, so I went to the kitchen to ask for a drink where I was greeted by Laura's mother. We generally had a nice talk about our own lives and she made sure I felt welcome. The whole gathering was mainly nothing special till it got to the dinner. I sat down next to my husband and Laura walked up to me and asked me to move. I asked why, since the only other spot available was next to her uncle and mother, and since it was about her mother wouldn't she want to sit next to her? Laura replied with, "Because I want to sit next to him, duh." I turned to my husband who just nodded and told me to move as well, saying that I was being childish and making a scene. At this point I generally felt my blood boiling. I stood up and told my husband that I felt uncomfortable and that I needed to go to the bathroom and ask where it was. Laura told me and I left the table doing breathing exercises trying to calm down. I ended up messaging my brother from the bathroom and he said I was being jealous and that I was overreacting, so I agreed and went back to the table to sit next to Laura's mother. The whole time they were laughing. It seemed that everything he said was funny to her and she kept rubbing his back, touching his arms, saying how strong he had gotten, and she would look at me smugly. The breaking point to all of this was when I put a bit of meat onto my plate and she said, "Are you really going to eat all of that?" And I froze in embarrassment while my husband and her laughed. Her mother stood up for me saying that was inappropriate and to treat guests with respect, but she ignored it. Laura is very pretty and slim and works out, so coming from her it hurts a lot. I stood up from my chair and left. I got home and my phone flooded up with messages from my husband and Laura. I read the messages and to my horror my husband was saying I ruined the whole dinner and that he was going to stay there for the night. I then read what Laura said, saying I had ruined her night because of my pick-me behavior. After doing research on that word, it's only filled me up with more anger. My husband came home around 5 p.m. from Laura's and I immediately said leaving me and staying at another woman's house was disgusting, and he started shouting that I'm overreacting again and that I need to go to counseling for my jealousy issues. For about a month everything was going okay again. Until I got a message from Laura this morning with a positive pregnancy result and a threat saying we should get divorced because it's my husband's. Former intimacy workers, who's the creepiest client you've ever had? I'm a cam girl and I had a client with a very specific fantasy. His dream girl is a demonic supervillain girl who likes to seduce girls, take them home to her impeccably decorated mansion, and unalive them in absurd ways with her horrific superpowers. He wrote out a character description for me. You have 4 different insanely powerful weapons. First of all, you can extend black metal claws from your fingertips. They are about 2 inches long and of course razor sharp. What you usually do with them is extend them once you're inside their womanhoods. You also use them to tickle them till they pee. Second, your body is equipped with 12 fire candles, 4 of which lead to the back of your throat and 8 lead to your womanhood. They are usually closed and are totally invisible. Opening them reveals little flames, and if you breathe out heavily while the throat canals are open you breathe fire. The ones in your womanhood function the same way, but instead of breathing out you just push with your musculature. These flames can vary in intensity ranging from "hey look what I can do, can you feel it getting a little warm?" to firestorms that destroy entire buildings in no time at all. One of the things that you like to do is to promise a girl their freedom. To do this they can down enough of your pee without spilling. Of course you never give them a chance. When they finally fail and spill, one by one you open the fire candles in your womanhood and then end her. Third is a row of 14 spikes that you extend down along the center of your body, down between your honkers, between your legs, up your back and coming full circle over the head and face. The spikes you can move at great speed, effectively turning yourself into a living chainsaw. This one you use when you've played with a girl for quite some time, and they just can't imagine that you can do any more terrifying things with your body. Fourth is the fact that your 2 forearms can morph into 2 machine guns. These are fully functional and you can fire almost endless number of bullets. As can be expected, you are of course quick, agile, superhumanly strong and completely invulnerable. You dress in a specific latex catsuit that morph along with your weapons. For instance, it parts in 2 halves when you extend your spikes. It automatically opens in your womanhood if you open your fire candles there. You like to seduce girls by seeming to be dangerously erotic. Should some girls fight back and show some proficiency in fighting, you're more than happy to make it a fight where you unleash everything on them. So now you may be wondering how our sessions go down. I studied the character and her backstory thoroughly, dressed up in the scariest outfit I have, and I basically bragged to my client about my exploits and character, while he enjoyed himself. Later on we stopped having sessions and he went to jail. He turned out to be a pedo.